Hey everyone, I'm the storyteller, and I'm here to help you relax tonight. I know a lot of you use this video to fall asleep, so before we start, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, tell me in the comments where are you from and what time is it there. Now, get comfortable, take a deep breath, and just relax. Hey everyone, I'm the storyteller, and I'm here to help you relax tonight. I know a lot of you use this video to fall asleep, so before we start, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, tell me in the comments, where are you from and what time is it there? Now, get comfortable, take a deep breath, okay, and just relax. 4 stories of déjà vu that changed everything. Déjà vu is that strange feeling when you think you've lived through something before. Most of the time, it lasts just a few seconds, and then it's gone. But what happens when it doesn't go away? What happens when that feeling keeps coming back, getting stronger each time? These are 4 true stories from people who experienced déjà vu that wouldn't stop. Stories that made them question everything they thought they knew about time and reality. 4 stories of déjà vu that changed everything. Déjà vu is that strange feeling when you think you've lived through something before. Most of the time, it lasts just a few seconds and then it's gone. But what happens when it doesn't go away? What happens when that feeling keeps coming back, getting stronger each time? These are 4 true stories from people who experienced déjà vu that wouldn't stop. Stories that made them question everything they thought they knew about time and reality. Music. Story 1. The coffee shop Lupi never believed in anything supernatural until what happened to me last spring. I'm telling you this because I need someone else to know, even if you think I'm crazy. I work at a marketing firm downtown, okay? And every morning I stop at this little coffee shop called Morning Brew on 5th Street. It's nothing special, just a small place with maybe 6 tables and a counter where they make pretty good coffee. I've been going there for 2 years. Same routine every day. I order a large black coffee and a blueberry muffin, sit at the table by the window and scroll through my phone for about 10 minutes before heading to work. On March 15th, something changed. I remember the date because it was the day before my birthday. I walked into the shop at exactly 8:17 a.m., like always. But as soon as I stepped inside, I felt weird. Not sick weird, but like I had already done this exact thing before. The barista, Sarah, was wiping down the counter. There was a man in a blue jacket reading a newspaper at the corner table. An older woman was adding sugar to her coffee. Everything felt like a replay of something I had already lived through. I brushed it off and ordered my usual. But as I sat down, the feeling got stronger. I knew the man in the blue jacket was going to sneeze in exactly 30 seconds. Counted in my head. 28, 29, 30. He sneezed. Then I knew the woman would spill a little bit of her coffee on the table. She did. Then I knew Sarah would drop a spoon behind the counter. She did. My hands started shaking. This wasn't normal. Déjà vu. I could predict what was happening next. Down to the second. Kay knew the door would open and a woman with red hair would walk in asking for a cappuccino with extra foam. Sure enough, the door opened. Red hair, cappuccino, extra foam. I left without finishing my coffee. The whole walk to work, I kept thinking about what had just happened. Maybe I was more observant than I thought. Maybe I had seen these patterns before and just never noticed. But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. This was different. The next morning, I almost didn't go to the coffee shop. Routine is routine, and I needed my caffeine. I walked in at 8:17 a.m. Same barista wiping the counter. Same man in the blue jacket. Same older woman adding sugar. My stomach dropped. It was happening again, but this time I was ready for it. I watched everything unfold exactly like the day before. The sneeze, The spilled coffee, the dropped spoon, the red-haired woman. Every single detail was identical. I sat there, frozen, watching this perfect repeat of yesterday morning. When the red-haired woman left, I expected it to be over. But it wasn't. I knew what would happen next, even though it hadn't happened the day before. A delivery truck would pull up outside. The driver would bring in boxes of coffee cups. Sarah would sign for them and stack them behind the counter. And it all happened exactly as I somehow knew it would. This continued for 7 straight days. Every morning, the same loop. The same people, the same actions, the same conversations. But each day, the loop got a little longer. First, it was just the morning rush. Then it included the lunch crowd. By day 5, I could predict everything that would happen in that coffee shop from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. I started writing it all down, testing myself. I wrote that at 2:33 p.m. A woman would come in asking for decaf, but then change her mind to regular. At 4:45 p.m., a teenager would try to pay with a card that would get declined. At 5:22 p.m., Sarah would accidentally make a latte instead of a cappuccino. For a regular customer, every prediction came true. On day 6, I tried to change things. Instead of ordering my usual, I asked for green tea. Sarah looked at me funny and said, "You always get black coffee," but she made the tea anyway. I thought, maybe I had broken the pattern. Then the man in the blue jacket sneezed right on schedule. The woman spilled her coffee. The red-haired woman walked in. Everything else happened exactly the same, except I was drinking tea instead of coffee. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what this meant, so I stuck in some kind of time loop. Was I going crazy? Was everyone else stuck too? Or was it just me who remembered? Asterisk, on day 7, I decided to test something bigger. When the red-haired woman walked in, I stood up and said, "You're going to order a cappuccino with extra foam." She stared at me like I was insane. "How did you know that?" she asked. That's when I realized other people weren't aware of the loop. Only I was. I tried to explain it to her, but she backed away and quickly ordered her drink. Sarah looked concerned. The other customers were staring. I realized how crazy I must have sounded. I left and didn't come back for 3 days. When I finally returned, everything was normal. Different people, different conversations, different events. The loop was broken, okay, but I had no idea why it started or why it stopped. Sarah acted like nothing had happened. Well, when I asked her if she remembered me predicting things, cool, she had no clue what I was talking about. I still go to that coffee shop, but not every day anymore. Sometimes I catch myself looking around, waiting for the familiar feeling to start again, because part of me wonders if it's still happening, just in ways I can't see yet. Part of me wonders if we're all stuck in loops we don't even notice, living the same patterns over and over until something or someone breaks us free. I've started paying attention to my daily routine more carefully now, and sometimes, just sometimes, I get that feeling again, like I've lived through a moment before, like I know what's coming next. When that happens, I stop and I listen and I watch, because maybe the loop never really ended. Maybe it just got bigger. The subway platform. My name is Jessica, and I work as a nurse at City General Hospital. I take the subway to work every day. Same train, same platform. What happened to me 6 months ago still gives me chills, and I don't think I'll ever understand it. I live in Brooklyn and work in Manhattan. So I take the Q train every morning at 7:15 a.m. from the 36th Street station. It's usually crowded, but I know the routine. I stand at the same spot on the platform because I know exactly where the doors will open when the train stops. I've been doing this commute for 3 years. On a Tuesday in September, the thing felt off from the moment I walked down the stairs to the platform. There was a man in a gray coat standing near the edge, checking his phone. A woman with a green scarf was sitting on one of the benches, reading a book. Kay, teenager, was listening to music with headphones that were too loud. Normal stuff, but it felt like I had seen this exact scene before. The train arrived at 7:18 a.m. It's 3 minutes late, like always. But as I stepped onto the car, the déjà vu hit me hard. I knew the man in the gray coat would get off at the next stop. I knew the woman with the green scarf would close her book and put it in her purse at 14th Street. I knew the teenager would change songs exactly when we pulled into Union Square. All of it happened exactly as I somehow knew it would. The man got off at the next stop. The woman closed her book at 14th Street. The teenager changed songs at Union Square. I started to feel sick to my stomach. This wasn't normal, but then I realized I knew more than just what would happen on the train. I knew what would happen at work, too. I knew my first patient would be an elderly man complaining about chest pain that would turn out to be heartburn. I knew my supervisor would ask me to cover for someone on the afternoon shift. I knew there would be a small accident in the parking lot around lunchtime. When I got to work, everything happened exactly as I had predicted. The elderly man with heartburn, the request to cover an extra shift, the parking lot fender bender at 12:30 p.m. I felt like I was watching a movie I had already seen, except I was one of the actors. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I tried to convince myself it was just coincidence. Maybe I was more observant than I thought. Maybe I had unconsciously picked up on patterns, but the feeling was too strong, too specific. The next morning, I took the same train, same platform, same time. Okay? And there they were again. The man in the gray coat, the woman with the green scarf, the teenager with the loud headphones. They happened exactly the same as the day before. Same conversations, same actions, same timing. This time, I paid closer attention. I noticed things I hadn't seen before, like the fact that the woman with the green scarf had a small coffee stain on her sleeve. The teenager had a scratch on his phone case. The man in the gray coat had mismatched socks. These tiny details that most people wouldn't notice, but they were exactly the same as the day before. On the third day, I tried something different. I got on a different car of the same train, but I could still see the same people through the windows. The man in the gray coat, the woman with the green scarf, the teenager, they were all there doing exactly the same things at exactly the same times. That's when I started to get scared. This wasn't just déjà vu anymore. This was like being trapped in a replay that only I was aware of. I started wondering if these people were real, or if they were just part of some kind of glitch in reality. On day 4, I decided to interact with them. When the train arrived, I approached the woman with the green scarf. "Excuse me," I said, "what book are you reading?" She looked up and said, "Oh, it's a romance novel, nothing special." Then she went back to reading. Up at 14th Street, she closed the book and put it in her purse, just like she had every other day. I tried talking to the teenager too. "Good music?" I asked. He pulled out one earbud and said, "Yeah, it's all right." But at Union Square, he changed songs exactly when. He always did. These people seemed real. They could respond to me, have conversations. They still followed the same pattern every single day. It was like they were programmed to do certain things at certain times, no matter what else happened. On day 5, something changed. I was standing on the platform when I noticed a fourth person I hadn't seen before. A woman in a red coat standing near the stairs. She looked directly at me and nodded, like she recognized me. When the train arrived, she got into the same car as me. As the train pulled away from the station, she came over and sat next to me. "You've been watching them too, haven't you?" she said quietly. I felt my heart start beating faster. "Watching who?" I asked. "The man in gray, the woman with the scarf, the kid with headphones. They do the same thing every day, don't they?" couldn't believe what I was hearing. Someone else had noticed. "How long have you been watching?" I asked her. 2 weeks, she said, "ever since I started taking this train." At first, I thought it was just coincidence, but it's too exact, too perfect. They're like actors following a script. We talked quietly for the rest of the ride. Name was Maria, and she was a teacher who had recently started working in Manhattan. She had noticed the same patterns, the same repeated actions, but she had seen something I hadn't. "Have you ever tried to follow one of them?" she asked. I hadn't. "I followed the man in the gray coat yesterday," she said. "Huh. He gets off at Canal Street and walks to the same building every day. He goes to the same coffee cart, orders the same thing, talks to the same people. It's like he's stuck in a loop." The next morning, Maria and I decided to do an experiment. We would each follow a different person and see what happened. I followed the woman with the green scarf. She got off at 14th Street, walked 4 blocks to an office building, went to the same floor, sat at the same desk, and started her day exactly the same way as always. But here's what was really strange. When I tried to talk to her coworkers, they acted like they had never seen her before. "It's no one by that description who works here," the receptionist told me. "Are you sure you have the right floor?" I went back to find the woman, but she was gone. Her desk was empty, like no one had ever sat there. I felt dizzy and confused. I called Maria, and she had the same experience. The teenager she followed seemed to disappear the moment she lost sight of him. That was the last day we saw any of them. The man in the gray coat, the woman with the green scarf, the teenager with headphones. They just vanished. Maria and I kept taking the same train, but they never appeared again. I still think about them sometimes. Were they ghosts from another time? Or were they just normal people who somehow got stuck repeating the same day over and over until something set them free? Maria thinks we were seeing some kind of time hiccup, like reality was skipping like a broken record. I don't know what to believe. All I know is that for 5 days, I watched the same 3 people live the same morning, over and over again. And then they were gone, like they had never existed at all. Now, when I take the subway, pay attention to the other passengers. Look for patterns, for repetition, for signs that someone might be stuck the way those 3 people were. Because if it happened once, it could happen again. And maybe next time, I'll know what to do to help them break free. The night drive home, I drive a delivery truck for a medical supply company. Most of my routes are during the day, but sometimes I have to make late-night runs to hospitals that need emergency supplies. What happened to me 3 months ago on one of these night drives still messes with my head. It was a Thursday in October, around 11:30 p.m. I had just finished a delivery to St. Mary's Hospital, about 40 miles outside the city. The drive back was pretty straightforward, mostly highway with a few small towns along the way. I've done this route maybe 50 times, so I know it well. Asterisk, about 20 minutes into the drive home, I started feeling weird. Not tired, not sick, just off somehow. The road ahead looked too familiar, like I had driven this exact stretch at this exact time before. I was listening to a talk radio show, and I had this strange feeling that I knew what the host was going to say next. Then it happened. As the host said, "Coming up after this commercial break, we'll talk about why people believe in ghosts." I knew he was going to say those exact words before he said them, word for word, exactly as I had somehow remembered. A few miles later, I saw headlights in my rearview mirror. A blue sedan was coming up behind me, going a little too fast for the conditions. The roads were damp from earlier rain, and there was some fog starting to roll in. I knew without looking that it was a middle-aged woman driving. It's talking on her phone, even though she shouldn't be. Sure enough, when the car passed me, I could see it was exactly what I had expected. A woman in her 40s, phone pressed to her ear, going at least 10 miles over the speed limit. I watched her taillights disappear into the fog ahead of me. Then I knew what was going to happen next, and it made my stomach drop. About 2 miles ahead, there's a sharp curve in the road. The woman wouldn't slow down enough, okay? She'd take the curve too fast, lose control, and slide off the road into the ditch. Her car would end up on its side, and she'd be trapped. I pressed harder on the gas pedal, trying to catch up to her. Maybe I could flash my lights, get her to slow down, change what I somehow knew was about to happen. But as I came around the curve, I saw her taillights sliding sideways. I heard the screech of brakes and the crash of metal as her car rolled into the ditch. I pulled over and called 911, then climbed down into the ditch to help her. She was conscious, but shaken up, trapped in her seatbelt with the car on its side. "How did you get here so fast?" she asked me while we waited for the ambulance. "I just saw you behind me a minute ago." I didn't know how to answer that. How could I tell her that I had known this was going to happen, that I had somehow seen it before it occurred? Instead, I just said I had been following her and saw the accident happen. The paramedics arrived and got her out safely. She had some bruises and a sprained wrist, but nothing serious. As I was giving my statement to the police officer, he mentioned something that made my blood run cold. "This is the 3rd accident at this exact spot this month," he said. "It's the same scenario. It's a single car, rainy night, takes the curve too fast." I couldn't stop thinking about that on the drive home. 3 accidents in the same place, same conditions. What if I hadn't just predicted this accident? What if I had somehow seen one of the previous ones? But that didn't make sense either. The woman, the car, even the radio show, everything had been exactly as I knew it would be. The next week, I had to make another late-night run to the same hospital. I was dreading it, but I needed the work. It's time. I paid careful attention to everything. It's the time, the radio station, the weather, conditions. It was a clear night. No rain, no fog, but about 20 minutes into the drive, I started getting that same feeling again. The déjà vu was back, stronger than before. I turned off the radio and tried to focus on driving, but I couldn't shake the sensation that I was repeating something I had already done. Then I saw headlights behind me. A red pickup truck this time, driving erratically. Ty somehow knew the driver had been drinking. I knew he would try to pass me on a straight stretch, about 5 miles ahead, but he wouldn't judge the distance correctly. There would be oncoming traffic, and he'd have to swerve back into my lane too quickly. I slowed down and moved as far right as I could. Sure enough, the red pickup came flying past me, barely missing an oncoming semi-truck. The driver swerved back into the right lane so hard that his truck fishtailed. Okay, but he managed to keep control. I followed him for the next 10 miles, watching him weave between lanes. At one point, his truck drifted onto the shoulder and back. I was sure he was going to crash, but somehow he made it to the next exit and turned off. That's when I realized something that scared me more than the near accidents. I wasn't just seeing these things before they happened. I was seeing different versions of the same drive home. Different cars, different drivers, different accidents, but all on the same stretch of road at the same time of night. I started keeping a journal of my late night drives. Every time I had to make that route, I wrote down what I saw, what I predicted, what actually happened. Over the next 2 months, I documented 12 different scenarios. Sometimes it was weather-related accidents. Times it was drunk drivers. Once it was a deer that ran into the road. But it was always something, okay? And I always knew it was coming before it happened. The strangest entry in my journal was from 3 weeks ago. I was making the same drive, same time, when I got the familiar feeling of déjà vu. But this time, I knew I was going to see my own truck coming from the opposite direction. I knew the other version of me would flash his headlights 3 times. As we passed each other, it sounds impossible, but it happened exactly as I somehow knew it would. I saw my own delivery truck, same company logo, same model, coming toward me in the southbound lane. Kea, as we got closer, the other driver, the other me, flashed his headlights 3 times. I flashed mine back, and we passed each other. I pulled over at the next rest stop and sat in my truck, shaking for 20 minutes. How do you see yourself driving in the opposite direction? How do you predict your own actions from another timeline? I've been thinking about this a lot. Maybe that stretch of highway is some kind of weak spot between different versions of reality. Maybe all the accidents, all the near misses, all the different scenarios are happening simultaneously. And sometimes people like me can see through to the other layers. Or maybe I'm just losing my mind from driving too many night shifts. But I don't think so. The predictions are too accurate, too specific. I think some places hold on to memories of things that happened, or will happen, or could happen. Sometimes, if you're in the right place at the right time, you can see through to those other possibilities. I still make the night drives when I have to, but now I'm prepared for them. I know that somewhere between mile marker 47 and mile marker 52, I'm going to see something that hasn't happened yet. And maybe, if I'm lucky, I can help prevent it from happening at all. The old movie theater I manage, a small movie theater that's been in my family for 3 generations. It's one of those old-fashioned places with red velvet seats and a big screen, the kind you don't see much anymore. What happened there last winter made me understand that some buildings hold on to more than just memories. The theater has been closed on Mondays for as long as I can remember. It's our maintenance day. We clean, fix anything that's broken, and get ready for the week. I usually spend Monday afternoons there alone, going through paperwork and making sure everything's running smoothly. On a Monday in January, I was in the office behind the concession stand when I heard something that made me look up from my receipts. It was the sound of the old projector starting up. Not the digital system we use now, but the original film projector that's been sitting unused in the booth for the past 10 years. I went up to the projection booth to investigate. The door was locked, just like always, and I had to use my key to get in. But when I opened the door, the old projector was running. Not just running, it was showing a movie on the screen downstairs. I looked down at the theater, and there were people in the seats, maybe 30 or 40 people scattered throughout the red velvet chairs. They were all watching the screen intently. But here's what made my skin crawl. I recognized the movie they were watching was Casablanca, and we had shown it exactly 1 week earlier as part of our classic movie series. I stood there watching for a minute, trying to figure out what was happening. The people in the seats looked normal enough. Some were eating popcorn. Some were holding drinks. A couple in the back row was sharing a box of candy. Looked like any regular movie showing, except we were supposed to be closed. I called down to them, "Excuse me, we're closed today." But nobody looked up. They just kept watching the screen. I called louder, "Hey, we're not open on Mondays." Still nothing. That's when I noticed something that made my hands start shaking. The woman in the third row, wearing a blue sweater. I remembered her. She had come to the Casablanca showing the previous Monday. She sat in the exact same seat, ordered the same snacks, even wore the same sweater. But it wasn't just her. As I looked more carefully, I recognized several other people from the previous week's showing. I ran downstairs to the theater floor. "Okay, ma'am," I said, approaching the woman in the blue sweater. "Excuse me, ma'am." But when I got close enough to touch her shoulder, my hand went right through her. She wasn't solid. None of them were. Asterisk. I backed away, slowly, my heart pounding. These weren't real people. They were like echoes or shadows of the audience from the week before. But they looked completely solid, completely real. If I hadn't tried to touch one of them, I never would have known the difference. I went back up to the projection booth and turned off the old projector. The image on the screen flickered and went dark. when I looked back down at the theater. All the seats were empty. The phantom audience had vanished the moment the projector stopped running. I locked up the theater and went home early that day. I tried to convince myself that I had imagined it all. Maybe I was more tired than I thought. Maybe the stress of running the theater was getting to me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had witnessed something impossible the next Monday. I came in prepared. I brought a camera and a voice recorder. I wanted to document whatever happened, if anything happened at all. Around 2:30 p.m., I heard the familiar sound of the old projector starting up. This time, I went straight to the projection booth. The projector was running again, showing another movie from the previous week's schedule. It was The Wizard of Oz, our Saturday matinee showing. And there was the audience again, maybe 25 people this time. I recognized several faces from the actual Saturday showing. I started recording with my camera, but when I played it back later, the video showed an empty theater. The audio recording was just silence. Whatever I was seeing, it couldn't be captured on film or tape. Over the next few weeks, this became a regular occurrence. Every Monday, the old projector would start up by itself. Every Monday, I would see a phantom audience watching a movie from the previous week. Sometimes it was a recent showing. Sometimes it was from a month earlier. Once, I saw an audience watching Gone with the Wind, which we had shown 6 months ago as part of a classic movie festival. I started keeping detailed records. What movie was showing, how many people were in the audience, which seats they occupied. I compared these to my actual ticket sales records, and the phantom showings matched perfectly. Same number of people, same seating arrangements, even the same concession sales patterns. But then something different happened. On a Monday in March, the projector started up and showed a movie I didn't recognize. It was an old black and white film, something from the 1940s maybe, and the audience was different too. The clothes were older, the hairstyles were from decades past. These weren't echoes from the previous week, echoes from long ago. An elderly man in the front row was wearing a suit and tie, like people used to dress up for movies. A young couple was sharing a large bag of popcorn that cost a nickel. According to the phantom concession stand prices, I somehow knew were correct. A woman in the back was smoking, something that would never be allowed in a theater today. I realized I was watching an audience from when my grandfather ran this theater, maybe from the 1940s or 1950s. These were people who had been dead for decades, but their presence, their enjoyment of a movie night, had somehow been preserved in the building itself. The strangest thing happened last month. The projector started up and showed a movie that we haven't screened yet. It was a new release that I had scheduled for the following weekend. The phantom audience was watching it, enjoying it, reacting to jokes and dramatic moments. But the actual movie hadn't even been delivered to our theater yet. That's when I understood what was really happening. This theater isn't just showing echoes of the past, somehow showing all the movie experiences that have happened here, are happening here, or will happen here. Time doesn't work the same way in this building. Past, present, and future audiences all exist together, separated only by which day of the week I happen to be there to see them. I don't try to stop it anymore. Every Monday, I let the old projector run. I watch the phantom audiences enjoy their movies. Sometimes they're from last week, sometimes from decades ago, sometimes from screenings that haven't happened yet. There's something beautiful about it, actually. All these people from all these different times sharing the same experience in the same seats. The love of movies, the joy of storytelling, the simple pleasure of spending 2 hours in the dark watching stories unfold on the big screen. I think about my grandfather who built this place. It's my father who kept it running through the hard times. All the audiences who have laughed and cried and gasped in these red velvet seats over the past 70 years. Maybe that's what the phantom showings really are. It's accumulated joy and emotion everyone who ever loved this place. I've started leaving popcorn in the concession stand on Mondays, even though I know the phantom audiences can't eat it. It just feels right. This is their theater too, even if they don't exist in my timeline anymore. They were here first, okay? And they'll probably be here long after I'm gone. Sometimes I wonder if I'll become part of the phantom audience someday. If someone will take over the theater after me, and on quiet Monday afternoons, they'll see me sitting in my usual seat in the back row, watching movies that I loved, existing as an echo in a building that holds onto every story it's ever told. The déjà vu doesn't bother me anymore when I see those familiar faces in the phantom audience. When I watch movies I've already seen being enjoyed by people who are no longer alive, it doesn't feel strange. It feels like home, because maybe that's what déjà vu really is. Not a glitch in our memory, but a glimpse into the truth that all times exist at once. All experiences are permanent, and some places are strong enough to hold onto every moment that ever mattered within their walls. These 4 stories all happened to real people. People who were just going about their normal lives when reality decided to show them something impossible. Maybe you've experienced something similar. Maybe you've had that moment when déjà vu felt like more than just a trick of memory. If you have, you're not alone. And maybe, just maybe, you caught a glimpse of something true about the way time and memory really work. Because if these stories teach us anything, it's that the line between past, present, okay, and future might not be as solid as we think. The next time you get that feeling like you've lived through something before, pay attention. It might be more than just déjà vu. It might be your mind touching something real, something that exists in the spaces between moments, in the places where time folds back on itself. And if it happens to you, remember these stories. Remember that you're not crazy, you're not alone, and you might just be seeing the world as it really is. A place where every moment that ever was, or ever will be, exists all at once, waiting for the right person at the right time to notice the pattern. The gas station visitor back in 2019. I worked the night shift at a gas station on the edge of town. It was one of those 24-hour places that mostly served truckers and people driving through at weird hours. I was 22 and needed the money for college, so I took whatever hours they gave me. Usually that meant 11 p.m. 2 7 a.m. shifts, just me alone most nights, with maybe 1 or 2 customers per hour after 2 a.m.d. The gas station wasn't fancy, just a small building with bright fluorescent lights, a couple rows of snacks and drinks, and a wall of cigarettes behind the counter. Outside we had 6 pumps and a parking area where truckers sometimes slept in their cabs. There was a security camera system, but half the cameras didn't work, and the ones that did was so old the footage looked like it was filmed through a dirty window. This particular night was a Tuesday in November around 3 a.m. when things got weird. I remember because I was watching the clock, waiting for my break at 3:30. The store was empty, which was normal for a weekday night. I was restocking the candy bars when heard the bell above the door ring. Someone had come in. Ian looked up and saw a woman, maybe in her 40s, wearing a long brown coat that went down to her ankles. Her hair was wet even though it hadn't rained in days. She walked straight to the back of the store where we kept the milk and juice, but she wasn't looking at the products. She was just standing there, facing the wall. "Can I help you find something?" I called out, but she didn't answer or turn around. She just stood there, perfectly still like a statue. It made me uncomfortable, but I figured maybe she was drunk or high. So I went back to what I was doing, keeping an eye on her. About 5 minutes passed, and she hadn't moved an inch. Finally, she turned around and walked to the counter, but she wasn't carrying anything to buy. She stopped right in front of me and stared. Her eyes were bloodshot, and she smelled like dirt and something else I couldn't place. Something chemical. "Maybe I need to use your phone," she said in a flat voice. "Sorry, we don't have a public phone. but there's a payphone outside by the air pump. I told her. She kept staring at me, then said, no, I need to use your phone. I had my cell phone in my pocket, but something told me not to let her use it. There was just something really off about her, the way she stood to steal away. She didn't blink. I can't do that. Sorry. Is there someone I can call for you? I offered. She tilted her head to the side like she was thinking, then said, they're coming for me. I need to tell someone where I am, who's coming for you. Are you in trouble? I can call the police, I said, reaching for the store phone nitrogen monoxide. She shouted and slammed her hand on the counter. No police, they're with them now. I was getting scared. She was clearly paranoid about something, and I was alone with her in the middle of the night. I kept my hand near the panic button under the counter. Look, I think you should leave, I said, trying to sound firm. She laughed, but it wasn't a normal laugh. It was hollow and went on too long. Okay? Then she leaned across the counter until her face was inches from mine. You don't understand, she whispered. They're already here. Right as she said that, the lights in the store flickered all, teased them at once. The woman smiled, showing teeth that were stained dark brown. Then she turned and walked out the door without another word. I watched her go outside, but instead of leaving, she stood under one of the gas station canopy lights. Standing there, facing the store, I could see her through the window, not moving, just watching. I was about to call my manager when a van pulled up next to her. It was white, with no windows in the back, no company name or anything. Two men got out, wearing dark clothes and baseball caps pulled low. They walked up to the woman, but she didn't run or fight them. She just got in the van like she was expecting Thimbo. They drove away. One of the men looked directly at me through the window. He held up his hand with all 5 fingers spread, then slowly closed it into a fist. They drove off, heading away from town. I called the police right away, told them everything. But they said, without a license plate or a better description, there wasn't much they could do. They took a report, and that was it. Rest of my shift, I kept expecting them to come back. Every car that pulled in made my heart race, but nothing else happened. When my replacement arrived at 7 a.m., I practically ran to my car. 4 days later, I was back for another night shift around 1 a.m. I was mopping the floor when I noticed something tucked behind the coffee machine. It was a folded piece of paper. I opened it, and my blood went cold. It was a photo of me taken through the store window. From outside, you could see me behind the counter, counting the register. The photo was grainy, like it was taken from far away, but it was definitely me. On the back, someone had written, 5 days, I quit that job. The next day, moved back in with my parents and found work at a warehouse. Better security and other people around. I never found out what 5 days meant, and I never went back to that gas station. Even during the day, I still think about that woman, sometimes wondering who she was, okay, and who they were. And I think about that man holding up 5 fingers most of all. I wonder if quitting saved me from something terrible, or if I was just paranoid. But I know what I saw and felt that night, and every instinct told me to get away from that place. The hotel night auditor. I spent 3 years working as a night auditor at a hotel in downtown Phoenix from 2020 to 2023. For those who don't know, a night auditor basically runs the front desk, overnight handles late checkouts, runs reports, and deals with whatever weird stuff happens when most people are asleep. And let me tell you, a lot of weird stuff happens in hotels. At Ninth Hotel, it was nothing special, just a mid-range chain with 150 rooms. It's mostly business travelers and families passing through. I worked alone from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. It's just me in the lobby with a panic button and a phone number for security who took 20 minutes to arrive on a good night. Most nights were boring, just paperwork and the occasional drunk guest who forgot their room number. But there was this one night in October 2022 that still gives me nightmares. It started normal enough. I came in at 11 and the evening shift girl filled me in on the day's issues. A complaint about noise on the 3rd floor, a broken ice machine on 5, and a guest in room 237 who had been acting strange. How? I asked. He checked in around 8 and paid cash, which is already weird, but he kept asking about the basement, asking if guests were allowed down there and where the stairs were. I told him the basement is employees only, to storage and the laundry, but he kept pushing about it, gave me the creeps. She said I made a mental note to keep an eye on room 237. The guest's name was Mr. Smith, which was obviously fake, but as long as he paid and didn't cause trouble, it wasn't. My problem round 1 a.m. I was doing my audit reports when the phone rang. It was an inside call from room 237 front desk. How can I help you? I had some silence on the other end, but I could hear breathing and low. Mr. Smith. I tried again. I need to get to the basement. A man's voice said flat and emotionless. I'm sorry, sir, but the basement is for employees only. Is there something specific you need? I need to get to the basement. He repeated exactly the same way, sir. I can't allow you in the basement, but if you need something, he hung up. I went back to my work, but something was bothering me about the call. I pulled up his registration on the computer. He had listed his address as 1223 Main Street, Anywhere, USA, and his phone number was all zeros, definitely. Fake info about 30 minutes later, I saw him on the security monitor, walking through the lobby. He was a thin man, maybe 50 years old, wearing a wrinkled gray suit. He walked past the front desk without looking at me and went straight to the elevator. Watched him get on and press the button for the 3rd floor, but something was weird about how he moved stiff, like he was forcing himself to walk normally. I kept watching the monitors and saw him get off on 3, but instead of going toward the guest rooms, he went the opposite way, toward the service stairs went all the way down to the basement high. Grabbed my keys and headed for the service stairs. When I opened the door to the stairwell, I could hear footsteps echoing from below. Going down, I followed. Staying quiet, the basement door was supposed to be locked, but when I got there, it was wide open. The lock looked like it had been broken from the inside out. Not in the basement. Was creepy even during the day. Just concrete. Walls exposed, pipes, and flickering lights at night alone. It was terrifying. I could hear movement from deeper in, where we stored old furniture and holiday decorations. Mr. Smith. I called out, "You can't be down here." The movement stopped then. I heard him say, "I found it." Found what? "Sir, you need to come back upstairs." I walked toward the sound past stacks of old mattresses and broken chairs in the very back corner. I found him standing in front of a wall, running his hands over the concrete, like he was feeling for something asterisk. Mr. Smith. He turned around and stepped back. His eyes were completely white. No pupils, no irises, just white, and something dark was dripping from his nose blood. Maybe, but it looked too thick. I found it. He said again, "They told me it would be here." "What are you talking about?" I asked, backing toward. The door smiled, and it was the worst smile I've ever seen. Too wide, too many teeth. Then he pressed something on the wall, and I heard a click. A section of the concrete swung inward, revealing a narrow passage beyond eye. Couldn't see what was in there. It was pitch black, but I could smell the decay and something chemical, like formaldehyde. 47 years. He said, 47 years I've been looking. He stepped into the passage, and the wall swung shut behind him, leaving no trace it had ever opened. I ran back upstairs and called the police, told them everything. They came and searched the basement, even brought some kind of scanning equipment, but they couldn't find any hidden passage or room. The wall looked solid. The security footage somehow got corrupted right around the time I went to the basement, showing nothing but statics. Police took a report, but I could tell they thought I was crazy, maybe seeing things from being tired. They ran the name Mr. Smith, but found nothing. No record of anyone checking in under that name, even though I had the registration right there in the computer. Tried to go back to work after that, but I couldn't every night. I'd hear sounds from the basement or get calls from room 237, even when it was empty. Started seeing things in the camera's shadows moving in the basement when no one should be there. Lasted 2 more weeks before I quit. Found a day job at a bank. But the weirdest thing that happens is someone forgetting their pen. But sometimes I still dream about that passage and what was behind Ivy. Did some research on the hotel, found out it was built in 1975 on the site of an old hospital that burned down in the 60s. The basement was part of the original building's foundation. I found one news article from 1961 about a doctor who went missing from that hospital along with several patients. They never found it. Maybe it was connected, maybe not, but I know what I saw that night, and I know that man found what he was looking for after 47 years of searching. I just hope whatever was in that passage stayed there. The cemetery security guard working security at a cemetery sounds like easy money, right? Just drive around, make sure no one's vandalizing. Headstones, maybe chase off some teenagers trying to drink beer. That's what I thought when I took the job in 2021. I was wrong. Riverside Cemetery was huge, 200 acres with graves dating back to the 1800s. I worked 4 nights a week, midnight to 8 a.m., driving a golf cart around the paths, checking the gates, making sure everything was secure. The pay was decent. And most nights, I just listened to podcasts and drank coffee. Cemetery had been having problems with people breaking in at night, stealing flowers and decorations from graves. Sometimes worse, so they hired overnight security. That's where I came. In 25 years old and needing a job that would let me go to trade school during the day. First few months were quite exactly what I expected. The worst thing, I dealt with was a drunk guy who climbed a fence and passed out on a bench. But in February 2022, things started getting strange. Began with the lights. The cemetery had these old street lamps along the main paths for the groundskeepers and funeral processions. One night, I noticed some of them turning on and off by themselves, not flickering, like they were broken, but turning completely off for a few seconds, then back on, like someone was flipping a switch. I reported it to maintenance, but they said the electrical system was fine, probably just old wiring acting up. But I knew something was off because the lights would only do it when I was nearby. I'd drive past a section and the lights would go out behind me, turn back on when I was far enough away. Came to sounds late at night when everything was quiet. I'd hear what sounded like digging, soft rhythmic sounds, like a shovel hitting dirt. But whenever I'd investigate, I'd find nothing. No disturbed graves. No one around. The sound would stop as soon as it got close, then start again somewhere else, always just out of sight. Night in March, I was doing my usual rounds about 3 a.m. when saw someone walking between the headstones in the old section where the graves were from the 1800s. It was a woman in a long white dress, not unusual for people to visit graves at weird hours, especially if they worked odd shifts. But she wasn't supposed to be there. After closing, I drove over, flashing my light. "Excuse me, ma'am, the cemetery is closed." I called out. Shay didn't respond, just kept walking slowly between the graves. Her dress was dragging on the ground, and her hair was long and dark, hanging loose down her back. "Ma'am, I need you to leave," I said, louder. Stopped then, but didn't turn around, just stood there, facing away from me. I got off my cart and walked closer, keeping my flashlight on her. "Are you okay?" I asked Ed one. She finally turned around. I wished she hadn't. Her face was wrong, not deformed or anything, but wrong. Like someone had tried to draw a human face from memory and got the proportions slightly off. Her eyes were too far apart, her mouth too small, and her skin was gray. Not pale, but gray, like ash. "I'm looking for my daughter," she said, and her voice sounded like it was coming from underwater, hollow and distant. "What's your daughter's name? Maybe I can help you find her grave." I offered, even though every instinct told me to run. "Sarah," she said. "Sarah Mills. She's been gone so long, I knew that name. There was a Sarah Mills buried in the old section, died in 1863 at age 7 from scarlet fever. I'd seen the headstone, a tiny lamb carved on top. "I can show you where she is," I said. Woman smiled, but it was horrible. Her mouth stretched too wide, like the corners were being pulled by invisible strings. "She's not there anymore." She said, "Someone took her." Took her? What do you mean? They come at night, dig them up, take them away. My little girl is gone. She started crying, but no tears came from her eyes. Just the sounds of sobbing. I backed away slowly. "I'll look into it, I promise, but you need to leave now." She tilted her head, looking at me with those wrong-placed eyes. "You're one of them, aren't you? You watch while they take our children." "No, I just work security. I don't." She screamed, then not a normal scream, but something that made my ears ring and my vision blur. When I could see clearly again, she was gone, just vanished. No sign of her anywhere. I searched the whole area, even checked Sarah Mills' grave. The headstone was there, undisturbed, but the ground around it looked different, darker, like the soil had been recently turned dye. Finished my shift, but I was shaken up the next night. I came back determined to figure out what was going on. I brought a better flashlight and a camera if something weird happened again. Okay, I wanted proof around 2 a.m. I heard the digging sounds again, coming from the old section. I drove over quietly, parking my cart a distance away and walking the rest on foot. The sound got louder as I approached a shovel, hitting dirt, definitely human knot, mechanical asterisk. I crept between the headstones, using them as cover, until I could see where the sound was coming. From there were 3 men in dark clothes, digging at a grave. They had shovels and a wheelbarrow nearby. As I watched, they lifted something out, wrapped in old cloth, and put it in the wheelbarrow grave robbers. I thought, reaching for my phone to call the police, but when I looked at my phone, the screen was black dead. Even though it had been fully charged an hour before, Young of the men must have heard me because he looked up directly at me, but his face under the hood wasn't human. It was that same wrong proportioned face, like the woman's gray skin, features in the wrong places. He's seen us. The thing said in a voice like grinding stone thief. All turned to look at 3 of those horrible faces staring from under their hoods. I ran faster than I've ever run in my life, back to my cart, but it wouldn't start. The engine just clicked. I could hear them coming through the graveside, abandoned the cart, and ran for the main gate on foot. It was a mile away, but adrenaline kept me going. I could hear them behind me, not running, but walking steadily, like they knew they'd catch me, eventually him. I reached the gate. I climbed over, not bothering with my keys, scraping my hands on the iron spikes at the top. I ran to my car, parked outside, fumbled with the keys, and got in just as I saw 3 dark shapes approaching. The Academy car started. Thank God, and I drove away without looking back. I never went back to that job, never even went to collect my last paycheck. I called and quit over the phone, made up some story about a family emergency. The manager sounded annoyed, but not surprised apparently. They had high turnover for night security. Looked up records for the cemetery. Later found reports going back decades about graves being disturbed, bodies missing, but always in the old section, always the graves of children, and always the cases were dropped due to lack of evidence. I don't know what those things were or why they were taking bodies. I don't want to know, but sometimes I think about that woman looking for a daughter, and I wonder how many others walk that cemetery at night, searching for children who aren't there anymore. The Warehouse Picker, 2023. I got a job at one of those massive warehouses that ship packages all over the country, the kind of place with millions of items stored on shelves that go up 40 feet high. I worked the night shift as a picker, 7 p.m. to 5 a.m., walking miles. Every shift with a handheld scanner, finding items and putting them in bins. For a shipping warehouse was the size of several football fields with narrow aisles between towering shelves. During the day shift, there were hundreds of workers, but at night, maybe 50 people spread across that huge space. You could go hours without seeing another person. It's just you and the endless rows of productside. Been working there about 2 months. When I was assigned to work in section G7 through G12. This was in the back corner of the warehouse, where they stored older inventory stuff that didn't sell often. The lighting was worse back there. Some of the shelves hadn't been touched in years. You could tell by the dust. It was a Thursday night in September, around 1 a.m. I was picking items for various orders when my scanner directed me to aisle G9, row 47 spot. B for some discontinued electronics cable. I walked down the narrow aisle between the massive shelves using my flashlight because half the overhead lights were out when I got to row 47. I stopped. The shelf was empty. Not just the spot I was looking for, but the entire section, several shelves completely bare except the dust, but my scanner insisted the item was there showing 12 units in stark eye. Figured it was an inventory error, happens all the time, so I started to mark it as not found when I heard a sound from above, like something sliding across metal. I looked up, shining my light toward the top shelves. 40 feet above there was someone up Torino. Ladder, no safety equipment, just a person crouched on one of the highest shelves. They were wearing what looked like an old warehouse uniform, but it was filthy and torn. When my light hit them, they scrambled backward, disappearing into the shadows between boxes. "Hey," shouted, "you can't be up there without safety gear." No response. I radioed for a manager, told them someone was climbing the shelves in G9, but the radio just gave me static. Nobody answered. I tried my cell phone, but had no signal, which was weird because I usually had at least 2 bars everywhere. In the warehouse, I decided to go find help, but when I turned to leave the aisle, both ends looked different. The shelves seemed taller, the aisle narrower and longer than before I walked toward what I thought was the exit, but after 5 minutes, I was still in the same aisle, passing the same row number stats, when noticed the items on the shelves were wrong. Instead of normal products, there were things that didn't make sense. Old rotary phones covered in dust, children's toys that looked decades old, mason jars filled with dark liquid that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. I heard that sliding sound again, closer this time. I spun around and saw the person from the upper shelf, now on the middle shelf, maybe 20 feet up. They were moving in a way that wasn't right, using their hands and feet to crawl along the shelf like a spider stayed back. I yelled, but they kept coming down as they got closer. I could see their face in my flashlight beam, and I immediately wished I couldn't. Their skin was pale and stretched tight over their skull. Their eyes were huge and reflective, like an animal's, and their mouth, when they opened it to smile at me, was full of too many teeth, all pointed and sharp. New picker, they said in a raspy voice. Been so long since we had a new picker. Ronnie sprinted down the aisle, not caring which direction, just trying to get away. I could hear them following, not on the ground, but up in the shelves, jumping from one to another, with sounds of metal creaking under their weight. Ty turned a corner and almost ran into another one. Okay, this one was standing on the ground, but hunched over like their spine was bent wrong. They were wearing the same filthy uniform with a name tag that said Employee of the Month, March 1987. "Where you going, Picker?" This one asked. Shifts not over. I dodged around them and kept running, but there were more of them now, coming out from between boxes, dropping down from shelves, all in those old uniforms, all with those horrible faces and too many teeth. They ran through aisles that shouldn't exist, past shelves stocked with items that made no sense. A row of glass containers with things floating inside that looked like human organs, children's shoes, all left feet, all different sizes. Television sets from the 1950s playing static. Finally, I saw light, real light, not the dim flickering of the back section. I ran toward it and suddenly was in the normal part of the warehouse section, A3, nowhere. Near where I had started. A co-worker found me there, gasping for breath, unable to explain what had happened. When I finally could talk, I told my manager about the people in G9. He looked at me, strange, and said, "We don't have a section G9 warehouse. Only goes up to G6. I insisted. I had been picking in G9, even showed him my scanner history, but the record showed I had been in D4 all night. The missing time, 3 hours gone, with no explanation. They sent me home early, said I was probably exhausted, seeing things, but I know what I saw. I went back the next night because I needed the job, but I refused any assignments in the G section. Stuck 2, through D, where the lights were bright and you could always see other workers 2 weeks later. A new guy started working nights within 3 days. He disappeared. His scanner was found in an aisle that supposedly didn't exist in security. Footage showed him walking into a section of the warehouse that just looked like a solid wall on camera. Quit after that. Found a day job that paid less but kept me away from warehouses, especially old ones with dark corners and too many places to hide a somatize. I wonder if those things were former employees, got lost in whatever that place was. Behind G6 workers who never clocked out, never went home, just stayed in those impossible aisles with their name tags from decades ago. Wonder if the new guy is there now, crawling through the shelves, with his uniform slowly rotting in his teeth, growing sharp, waiting for the next new picker to wander too far into the dark bud. Mostly, I try not to think about it at all, because when I do, I can still hear that sliding sound of bodies moving across metal shelves, and I can still see those reflected, eyes watching me from 40 feet up. In the dark, the driver who knew too much I started, was driving for Uber in early 2022, when I lost my office job during the tech layoffs. Everyone was getting hit, and I had bills to pay, rent was due, and my savings were running out fast, so I signed up thinking it would be temporary just until I found something better. But you know how that goes. Months turned into a year, and I was still driving nights in Seattle, picking up drunk people from bars and tired workers. Heading home most nights were predictable. You learned the patterns quickly. Thursday through Saturday were the money nights with bar crowds and partygoers. Sunday through Wednesday were quieter, mostly airport runs and late shift workers I preferred. The quiet nights, fewer problems, less vomit in the backseat, and people generally just wanted to get where they were going without dramatics, happened on a Tuesday night in March 2023. Around 2 a.m., I had just dropped off a nurse at Swedish Medical Center and was thinking about calling it a night when I got a ping for a pickup in Capitol Hill. The name showed as Amanda, and the pickup spot was outside an apartment building on a quiet side street. When I arrived, there was a woman standing under a streetlight wearing jeans and a dark jacket. She looked normal enough, maybe late 20s, brown hair in a ponytail, holding a small backpack she got in the back seat, and confirmed her name, Amanda. I asked, "Yes, that's me," she said, but something in her voice sounded strained, like she was trying to sound casual, but failing. Started the trip and saw the destination was a house in Ballard, about 20 minutes away. At this time of night, with no traffic, we drove in silence for the first few minutes, which wasn't unusual. Lots of passengers don't want to talk, especially late at night, but I kept catching her, watching me in the rearview mirror, not just glancing, but staring intently. "Everything okay back there?" asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Fine," she said quickly. Then, after a pause, "Actually, can I ask you something weird?" "Sure, what's up?" "Do you ever feel like you're being followed? Like someone's watching you?" I laughed nervously, not really know why. "Do you feel like someone's following you?" She leaned forward slightly, and I could see her face better in the mirror. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying, and there were dark circles under them like she hadn't slept in days. Not followed exactly, more like watched, like someone knows where I am all the time, knows what I'm doing, even when I'm alone in my apartment. "That sounds scary. Have you talked to the police?" I suggested, laughed, but it was bitter, not amused. "They can't help with this." We drove in silence for another minute before she spoke again. "You picked me up at 2:17 a.m. Exactly." I glanced at the clock. She was right. It's 2:17 when I had arrived at her pickup spot. Asterisk. "Yeah, so it's quiet," I said. "Last Tuesday, you picked up a man named David from the same spot at 2:17 a.m. Exactly my hands tightened on the wheel. How could you know that I did remember that ride? Because the guy had tipped really well, but there was no way she should know about it. "How do you know that?" I asked. "The Tuesday before that, it was a woman named Claire. Also, 2:17 a.m., same spot," she continued. "And 3 Tuesdays ago, it was Michael, then Sarah, then Robert." She was right. I remembered all those rides, all from that same apartment building, all around the same time, but I picked up hundreds of people. How? Could she know the specific names and times I don't understand? I said, how do you know about my other passengers? Because I've been watching you, just like someone's been watching me, she said. Every Tuesday at 2:17 a.m., you pick someone up from that building, and every single one of them disappears. What? Do you mean disappears? Asterisk. David worked at my company. He hasn't been to work since that night his family filed a missing persons report. Claire was my neighbor. Her apartment is empty now. Landlord says she just left without notice. Didn't even take her stuff. My mouth was dry. I wanted to pull over, but we were on the freeway now, doing 60 miles per hour. I think you're confused. I said, I just drive people where they want to go. That's all. Then why don't you remember where you took them? Ski. She asked. Tried to think back to those rides. David had gone to an address in Fremont, I thought. Or was it Wallingford? More. I tried to remember. The fuzzier it got, like trying to recall a dream in Claire. Where had she gone? I couldn't remember at all. I take a lot of rides. Sweetly. I can't remember them all. You'll remember picking them up, but not where you took them, she said. Don't you think that's strange? We're getting close to the Ballard destination, and I just wanted this ride to be over. Something was very wrong here, but I couldn't figure out what every time. I tried to focus on those previous rides. My mind would slide away like trying to grab smoke. Why did you request me specifically? Kay asked, because now I was sure. She knew too much for this to be random. I didn't. She said the app assigned you, just like it assigned you to all the others. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Why is it always you? Why always? It's 2:17. Why always Tuesday? We pulled up to the destination, a small house on a dark street, no lights. On inside, no cars in the driveway. It looked abandoned. This is your stop. Isaichi didn't move. Aren't you curious where you've been taking people? Why you can't remember? Please, just get out. I said. I was scared. Now really scared. Look at your trip history. She said, look at all your Tuesday 2:17 rides. See where? You took them. I wanted her gone, but I also wanted to know. I pulled up my driver app and went to trip history, scrolling back through weeks of rides. There they were, every Tuesday. David, Claire, Michael, Sarah, Robert, all picked up at 2:17 a.m., but the destinations were blank, just showing trip completed with no address. That's not possible. I muttered. The app always shows the destination, unless someone doesn't want you to remember. Amanda said. I looked back at her, and she was holding up her phone, showing me something, a photo of a man. I recognized it but couldn't place it. This is you, she said, from 2019, before you started driving. This is your missing persons photo. The world tilted. I stared at the photo. It was me, but younger, wearing clothes I didn't recognize, standing in front of a house I'd never seen. No. I said, no, that's not right. I started driving last year. I lost my job. I needed money. Did you? She asked. Can you remember your job? Your boss's name? What company you worked for? I tried, but it was like the destinations, all fog, nothing concrete. Every Tuesday at 2:17, you pick someone up and bring them here, and they disappear. She said, and every Tuesday you forget, just like you forgot that you've been doing this for 4 years. Not one, just like you forgot that you're one of them too. You're crazy. I said, but my voice was shaking. Then why are we here? She asked. This isn't the address I put in the app, look. She showed me her phone. The destination was supposed to be an address in Queen, in completely different neighborhood. Sometimes I remember things. She said, fragments, pieces. Tuesday nights I remember being in this car, remembering conversations just like this one with other passengers who figured it out, who tried to break the pattern. I need you to leave. I said, get out of my car. You can't leave either. She said, try. I put the car in reverse, but my hands wouldn't move to the wheel. I tried to press the gas, but my foot wouldn't respond. I was frozen. It won't let you leave until I go inside. She said sadly, that's how it works. Every Tuesday, you bring someone here and they go inside. and then you forget what's in the house. I whispered, I don't know. She said, none of us remember that part. We just know we've been here before. All of us, over and over, and we keep coming back, keep getting in your car, keep trying to figure out how to stop it. She opened the door and stepped out, then turned back to me. Next Tuesday, you'll pick someone else up at 2:17. She said, maybe it'll be me again, maybe David or Claire. We all come back eventually, but you'll never remember this conversation, just like you don't remember the others. Wait, I said, finding my voice. Don't go in there. I have to, she said. Just like you have to drive away and forget in about 30 seconds. You won't even remember my name. She walked toward the dark house, and I wanted to stop her, wanted to help, but I couldn't move until I heard the front door close. Then suddenly, I could. I put the car in reverse, backed out of the driveway, and drove away. By the time I reached the main road, I was already forgetting why I was. In Ballard. What was that last passenger's name? Something with an A. Maybe I checked my app, but the ride history just showed trip completed with no details. I drove home with a nagging feeling that something important had happened, but unable to grasp what. By morning, it was gone completely. Just another night of driving, another fare collected. But sometimes on Tuesday nights when I'm driving through Capitol Hill at 2 a.m., I get a strange feeling like deja vu, like I'm about to remember something important, and my hands shake on the wheel for reasons. Can't explain it. I always seem to be free at 2:17 a.m. on Tuesdays. It's always available for that ping from the apartment building on the quiet side street, always ready to pick up someone whose name I'll forget, whose destination will disappear from my records, whose face will fade from my memory. As soon as they step out of my car, I keep telling myself I'm going to check my records, going to figure out the pattern, but somehow I never do. Somehow I always forget until the next Tuesday at 2:17 when my phone pings and I accept the ride without thinking. Bex, that's what I do. I drive people where they need to go, even if I can't remember where that is, even if they never come back. Even if somewhere deep down I know I'm one of them too, trapped in this cycle, but I keep driving because what else can I do? It's my job. I need the money. I lost my office job in the layoffs. I needed something temporary. At least that's what I tell myself when I can remember to think about it at all. The late night pool ride working as an Uber driver in Miami taught me pretty quickly that the late night crowd was where the real money was, especially on weekends. You get the club goers, the bar hoppers, the people leaving parties at 3 a.m., willing to pay surge pricing just to get home safe. I'd been driving for about 6 months when this happened in August 2022, and I thought I'd seen everything: drunk passengers, people trying to sneak open containers, crazy stories about their nights, but nothing prepared me for that pool ride ever. Those who don't know, Uber Pool lets multiple passengers share a ride if they're going in the same general direction. It's cheaper for them and sometimes more money for drivers if you can stack the rides, okay? But it also means picking up strangers who have to share the car with each other, which can get weird asterisks. It was a Saturday night, technically Sunday morning around 2:30 a.m. I just dropped off a group at a hotel in South Beach. I got a pool request. First passenger was named Marcus Pickup at a nightclub on Washington Avenue. Pretty standard stuff. Marcus was waiting outside when I pulled up. Tall guy, maybe 35, wearing a button-up shirt and jeans, looking tired but sober. He got in the back, driver's side, and nodded when I confirmed his name. Pool ride. Okay, I asked, even though he'd already selected it. Some people don't realize what they're ordering. Yeah, that's fine, he said. Settling in, the app immediately showed another pickup 3 blocks away, passenger named Diana. I drove over and found a woman in her late 20s wearing a cocktail dress and heels. She got in the passenger side back seat, barely glancing at Marcus. Hi, Diana. I confirmed, that's me, she said, then looked at Marcus's pool ride. Yeah, we're both heading north, I said, starting to try to think about Miami at night. Is that even at 2 a.m.? It's traffic. so I was focused on driving when the app pinged again, third passenger, 4. The pool named Josh pickup at an apartment building on the waitlist was unusual, 3 passengers in one pool ride. Didn't happen often, but the algorithm must have figured out they were all going to the same area in North Miami, so I headed to the pickup. Spot Josh was standing on the curb, young guy, early 20s, wearing shorts and a tank top with a backpack. He paused when he saw the car was already pretty full, Uber pool. He asked, "Yeah, hop in front." I said, got in the passenger seat, turning to look at the 2 in the back. "Hey," he said. Neither Marcus nor Diana responded. They were both staring straight ahead, not at their phones, not out the windows, just staring at the back of the seats in front of them. "Okay then." Josh muttered. I started driving north, and that's when things got uncomfortable, usually in a pool ride. There's some small talk, or at least people on their phones, but all 3 passengers were completely silent, and still Marcus and Diana in the back weren't moving at all. Not even the normal shifting around people do in cars. So everyone have a good night. I tried breaking the tension. "Fine," Josh said, but he was looking at the back seat through the mirror with a worried expression. Marcus and Diana didn't answer. Drove for maybe 5 minutes in this weird silence when Josh leaned over to me and whispered, "Hey man, something's wrong with them." I glanced in the rearview mirror. Marcus and Diana were sitting exactly as they had been, eyes open but unblinking, staring straight ahead. "You guys okay back there?" I asked, loud and no response. Josh turned around in his seat. "Hello? Are you guys all right?" That's when Diana's head turned, not her whole body, just her head rotating slowly to look at Josh. Her expression didn't change, blank face, empty eyes, but her head kept turning further than it should have, like her neck was on a swivel. "What the fuck?" Josh said, pressing back against his door. Marcus's head started turning to same slow mechanical movement until both of them were staring at Josh with those empty eyes. "Pull over," Josh said urgently. "Pull over right now." But before I could react, Diana spoke, her mouth barely moving. "You weren't supposed to be in this car." Her voice was wrong, flat and electronic, like a bad text-to-speech program. "The route is incorrect," Marcus said in the same electronic monotone to many passengers. I was trying to process what was happening while looking for a place to pull over when Josh grabbed my arm. "Dude, they're not breathing. Look at them. They're not breathing." He was. Right, no rise and fall of their chests, no movement at all, except those horrible, slowly turning heads, recalculating. Diana said, removing excess passenger. Both back doors clicked like they were trying to unlock, but I had the child locks on a habit when dealing with drunk passengers. The handles moved up and down as Marcus and Diana tried to open them there. Movements perfectly synchronized. Let me out, right now." Josh was yanking at his door handle, swerved into a gas station parking lot, and hit the brakes. Josh practically fell out of the car, scrambling away from the vehicle. I jumped out to my heart, pounding. "What the hell are you?" Josh yelled at the 2 still in my backseat. Marcus and Diana's heads swiveled toward us through the windows, moving in perfect unison era. They both said, loud enough for us to hear through the glass root, compromised, initiating cleanup protocol. Then they started to change her. Faces began to shift and ripple like there was something moving under the skin, their features blurring and reforming. Marcus's face stretched, becoming longer, while Diana's compressed, both of them losing any distinguishing characteristics until they looked identical, blank, mannequin-like faces with black holes where eyes should be run. I said to Josh, "Just run," but he was frozen, staring as those things in my back seat continued to change their bodies, seeming to melt and flow like liquid, reshaping themselves. Hard started, okay? By itself. I know that sounds impossible, but I had the keys in my hand and the engine turned on, the headlights flashed, and it began to roll forward. Slowly, I grabbed Josh and pulled him further back as my car drove itself out of the parking lot. The 2 things in the back seat visible through the rear windows still transforming into something I couldn't understand right. Watched my car merge back into traffic and disappear, heading north like nothing had happened. What were those things? Gosh, he asked, his voice shaking. I don't know, I said, and I really didn't call 911, but what could we tell them that 2 passengers turned into monsters and stole my car? The operator thought we were drunk or on drugs, but they said they'd send someone. While we waited, I checked my Uber app. The pool ride was still active, showing 3 passengers, Marcus, Diana, and Josh, but their profile pictures had changed. All 3 showed the same image, a black square with no features in the ride, ended marked as completed. All 3 passengers delivered successfully, even though Josh was standing right next to Mimi's car, was found 3 days later, abandoned in the Everglades, completely clean, no fingerprints, no DNA, nothing. The police said it had been wiped down with something that removed all traces of biological material. The only strange thing was the back seat. Both sides had these indent marks pressed deep into the cushions, like something incredibly heavy had been sitting. The Uber said their system showed no record of the ride. No passengers named Marcus, Diana, or Josh had used the service that night. According to their data, I'd gone offline after my South Beach drop-off and never picked up anyone else about it. Josh remembered he gave the police the same story I did separately. They didn't believe us, said we must have coordinated our stories, but why would we make up something so insane? Never drove for Uber again. Couldn't bring myself to get in a car with strangers after that, and sometimes, late at night, I check this app just to see, and every now and then, I'll see a pool ride available with 3 passengers, all with black squares, 4 profile pictures, all going to the same destination, somewhere north. I wonder how many drivers pick them up, how many complete the route without a 3rd passenger to break whatever pattern those things were following, and wonder what happens when they reach their destination. Josh and Kai stayed in touch for a while, both of us trying to make sense of what we'd seen. He started having nightmares about blank-faced people standing outside his apartment at night, watching his windows. Said he felt like he was being evaluated, measured for something classed. I heard he'd moved out of state, trying to get away from whatever we'd encountered that night. I stayed in Miami, but I don't go out at night anymore, and I definitely don't use rideshare apps, because sometimes when I'm walking past parked cars, I see shapes in the back seats that don't look quite right, heads that turn a little too far, faces that seem a little too blanked. I remember Diana's voice saying removing excess passenger, and wonder what would have happened if Josh hadn't been there to break their pattern, if it had just been those 2 things in my backseat all the way to their destination. I think about that more than I should, and it's why I'll never pick up strangers again, no matter how much money I can make, because some rides aren't meant to be shared and some passengers aren't. People at all asterisk. The driver who collected souvenirs, I only drove Uber for 3 months in 2021, but it was enough to mess me up permanently. See, needed extra cash. My mom was sick, medical bills piling up, and my regular job at the grocery store wasn't cutting it, so I signed up to drive nights in Chicago. Figured I'd do it for a few months, save up what we needed, and quit. Simple plan. Except nothing about those 3 months was simple. Started in September, when the weather was still nice driving. Friday and Saturday nights from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. The bar crowd, mostly young people heading to River North or Wicker Park. Good tips, especially when they were drunk and happy. I kept the car clean, played whatever music they wanted, and tried to be the driver. Everyone gave 5 stars. Tiber breathing was normal for the first few weeks. Then I picked up Gretchen, which was a Thursday night around 11 p.m. Slower than the weekends, but still decent. He was standing outside a dive bar on Western Avenue, middle-aged. Guy wearing a Bears jacket and jeans, looking like every other Chicago dad you'd see at a sports bar. He got in the front seat, which was weird. Most passengers sat in the back, but I didn't say anything. Hey, I'm Mike. I said Greg. Key replied, then immediately started asking questions. Not small talk questions, but specific ones. How long have you been driving? You like it? Ever have any crazy passengers? Anyone ever leave anything in your car? That last question? He asked it differently, leaning in like it was the most important thing sometimes. I said, usually phones or wallets. I always return them. But what about other things? He pressed personal things, weird things. I laughed uncomfortably. Not really just the usual stuff. He nodded, but kept staring at me, not forward at the road, but at me, watching my face as I drove I used to drive. He said, finally, 2 years, did the late shifts, like you saw everything people do in the backs of cars when they think no one's watching. Yeah, I bet. I said, just trying to be polite. They leave pieces of themselves behind. He continued, not just objects, but pieces, little fragments of who they are. And if you pay attention, if you really look, you can collect those pieces. We were at a red light, and I turned to look at him. His eyes were bright, intense, in a way that made me want to unlock the doors. What do you mean collect? Hey, I smiled. I'll show you, someday, maybe. The rest of the ride was quiet. He had me drop him off at an apartment building in Albany Park, gave me a $20 cash tip, and said, pay attention to what they leave behind. I forgot about him until 2 weeks later, same. Thursday night, same pickup spot. Outside the bar, there was Greg, waiting, my regular driver. He said, getting in the front seat again. How's the collecting going? I'm not collecting anything, Cass said. Sure you are. You just don't know it yet. He pulled out his phone. Look, he showed me photos, dozens of them, all of car back seats, but zoomed in on specific things. A lipstick stain on leather, a torn concert ticket, a single earring, a bloody tissue. Every ride tells a story, he said, scrolling through more photos. This lipstick. Girl was crying, her makeup running everywhere. Boyfriend had just dumped her by text while she was in my car. This ticket. Guy was going to propose at the concert, but chickened out, tore up the ticket instead. How do you know all that, Kay? I asked, even though I didn't really want to know, because I kept them. He said, simply, the lipstick, the ticket, the earring from the girl who was sneaking home from an affair, the tissue from the kid who got jumped, everything they left. I kept it, and when you keep something that personal, it's like keeping a piece of their story. That's... I didn't know what to say. Creepy seemed too mild smart. He finished. It's smart because those pieces add up, and if you collect enough of them, you start to understand something important. We'd reached his drop-off, but he didn't get out. I'll make you a deal, he said. Start collecting one thing from each ride, just one small thing they leave behind, and next time I see you tell me what you've learned. I can't take people's stuff. I said, not taking, okay? He corrected, collecting what they abandoned, what they don't even know they've lost, okay? Got out, left another 20, and was gonna told myself, wouldn't do it his weird collecting thing, but that night, after my next passenger left, I saw a hair tie on the back seat, just a simple black elastic band, and without thinking, I picked it up, put it in my cup holder in the next ride. Someone left a receipt from a pharmacy, and I kept that to be the end of the night. I had a small pile of gum wrapper, a broken pen cap, a single fake eyelash, a parking ticket, nothing valuable, nothing anyone would miss, but kept them moving. The next week, it became a compulsion. After every ride, I'd check the back seat, find something, anything, and add it to my collection. I started keeping them in a box in my trunk, organized by date and timeline. Weird part was Greg was right. Each object did seem to tell a story. The fake eyelash came from a girl who spent the whole ride crying about her ex. The parking ticket from a guy stressed about money, talking on the phone about bankruptcy. The broken pen from a student who just failed an important exam. Started to feel like I knew these people in a way I shouldn't know intimate details of. Their lives from the fragments they left behind. 2 weeks later, Thursday night, Greg was there again. Show me, he said. As soon as he got in, he hesitated, but pulled out my phone, showed him pictures of my collection, smiled wide. You're getting it, but you're still thinking too small. These are just objects. You need to go deeper. What's deeper than stealing? People stuff, I asked, not stealing preserving. He pulled out his own phone again. Let me show you my real collection. The photos he showed me next made my stomach turn hair. Actual human hair in small plastic bags, labeled with dates, strands pulled from headrests or caught in seatbelts DNA. He said proudly, every person who rides in your car leaves DNA, hair, skin, cells, saliva, and if you're careful, if you're methodical, you can preserve it all. That's insane. I said, that's actually insane, is it? He asked, how's it different from what you're doing? You're already collecting their stories. I just collect the physical proof that they existed. Get out of my car. I said, you'll see. He said, opening the door, once you start really collecting, you can't stop because each piece makes you hungry for the next. Each fragment reveals a little more about the human condition asterisk. I drove home, deleted his ride from my history, and threw my box of collected items in the dumpster. I was done with this whole thing, but the next night, I found myself checking the back seat again, and when I found a tissue with lipstick on it, I put it in a plastic bag. Then I started bringing tape to collect hair samples within a week. I had a new box, this one organized more carefully, each item in its own bag, labeled with time, date, pickup, and drop-off locations. Notes about the passenger. I told myself it was just curiosity, just a weird hobby, but late at night when I was organizing my collection, I'd feel this strange connection to all these strangers whose lives I'd briefly intersected. A month went by, my collection grew. I had hundreds of items now, filled 3 boxes hair, samples, tissues, receipts, pieces of jewelry, fragments of lives sorted and cataloged with them. Came the night that ended everything. Got was Saturday, 2 a.m. I picked up a young woman from a club in Lincoln Park. She was drunk, not sloppy, but definitely impaired. Spent the ride on her phone, texting someone, arguing about where to meet. When she got out, she left something. A small leather journal must have fallen from her purse. I should have called out to her, should have returned it immediately, but I didn't. I waited until she was inside her building. Then I opened. If's journal was filled with her deepest thoughts, fears about her sick father, her struggles with addiction, her plan to leave the city and start over. Pages and pages of raw honesty. Kept. It added it to my collection. Spent hours that night reading and rereading, learning everything about this stranger. Next Thursday, Greg was waiting. Different spot, this time outside. 24-hour diner. I knew you'd be ready. He said, getting in. You have to look now. The collector's look. I don't want to do this anymore. Sad, but even I could hear the lie in my voice. Show me your best piece. He said. I couldn't help myself. I showed him the journal. His eyes lit up. Perfect. A whole life in one object. But you know what would make it even better? Asterisk. What? I asked, even though I knew I shouldn't meeting her again. He said, picking her up randomly, seeing if she mentions the missing journal, watching her, not knowing you have her secrets. That's stalking. Stalking. He corrected the collection. He corrected the object, plus the observation, equals the full story. He had me drive to an address in Rogers Park, an old building with a faded sign reading safe storage. Come inside. He said, let me show you what a real collection looks like. Every instinct told me not to follow him, but the deed led me to a storage unit in the basement behind a heavy metal door. When he opened it, the smell hit me first. Mothballs and something else. Something. Organ-inch unit was filled floor to ceiling with boxes, all labeled with dates going back years. Thousands of them. 20 years of collecting. He said proudly, 20 years of preserving human moments. He opened one box, showing me the contents, hair samples in labeled bags. Photographs taken without permission, personal items ranging from driver's licenses to medication bottles. This one, he said, pulling out a folder. Sarah. Chen picked her up 53 times over 2 years, collected everything she left behind, learned her routine, her habits, her fears. The folder was full of photos of the same woman, taken from her car receipts, with her name on them, notes about her conversations. You stalked her. I said, I preserved her. He insisted she moved away 3 years ago, but Kaya still have all these pieces of her existence, proof she was real, that her life intersected with mine, box after box. He showed me his collection of hundreds, maybe thousands, of people, all categorized and preserved like specimens. This is what you're building toward. He said, this is the natural evolution of collecting. I backed toward the door. This is sick. You need help? And I swear to you, right as I thought that, I heard it. Double quotes, Ethan, ... whispered from behind. We spun around, ran all the way back to the car. I still hike, but I've never gone back to that trail, okay? And sometimes I wonder if the man was someone I was supposed to become if I kept walking forward. Or maybe I already had. The wrong turn. I remembered I used to commute to work through this long, empty stretch of back roads outside of Denver. It was boring, but peaceful. One day in December, it started snowing hard, okay? My normal route was blocked by an accident, so I took a detour I had never used before. As I drove, I realized something strange. I recognized this road, not just in the general, I've seen this before way, but every tree, every turn. I knew exactly when the next stop sign was. I even whispered to myself, there's going to be a green mailbox on the left, ... And there it was. It didn't make sense. I had never driven that road before. Then I got to a fork, left or right. I knew I had to go right, okay? I remembered going right and crashing. The memory hit me hard, like a flash. Snow, headlights, pain. So I went left instead, and nothing happened. I got to work late, but safe. That night, I looked up old crash records for that area. In 2019, man had died at that intersection, same model and color car as mine. I never told anyone about this, but now I take new routes often. I wonder if some roads are cursed, or maybe some memories aren't ours at all. Maybe they're warnings. The girl who knew my dreams in 2015 worked as a part-time janitor at a children's therapy center. Most of my job happened after hours. The building was quiet and kind of eerie when empty. There was one girl who stayed late sometimes. Her name was Leela. She was maybe 9 or 10. Always quiet, always drawn. One evening, I passed her while mopping the hallway. She looked up and said, "You dream about the woods." I froze. "How did you know that?" I asked. She shrugged. "You always do, with the man and the deer skull and the fire." I hadn't told anyone about those dreams. I've been having them for weeks. Dark forest, bones hanging in trees, fire in the distance. "How do you know that?" I asked again. She just smiled, because I've seen it too. In the last version, I didn't know what she meant. It scared me. The next night, I dreamed again. This time, the man with the deer skull mask looked straight at me and said, "She remembers more than you." I woke up drenched in sweat. The next day, Leela wasn't there. I asked one of the therapists. They said no child named Leela had been scheduled that week. Checked the sign-in sheets. Nothing. I don't know who she was, but a few months later, I dreamed of her one more time. She was standing in the forest, holding a match. And she said, "Next time, try to remember sooner," and everything burned. Sometimes I wonder if some people are born remembering, and the rest of us just try to catch up. The Loop at Miller's Diner. My name is Sarah, and this happened to me last year when I was working at a 24-hour diner outside of Phoenix. Miller's Diner had been there since the 1960s, one of those old places with cracked vinyl booths and a neon sign that buzzed when it rained. I worked the night shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., mostly serving truckers and insomniacs who needed coffee and pie at 3 in the morning. The diner was usually pretty quiet after midnight, maybe 5 or 6 customers total on a good night. I knew most of the regulars by name. There was Frank, who drove trucks and always ordered black coffee and apple pie. There was Mrs. Chen, who came in around 2 a.m. after her factory shift and got the same turkey sandwich every time. And there was Tom, a guy about my age, who said he worked construction but never looked dirty enough for that to be true. It started on a Tuesday night in November. There's nothing special about that night. It was cold outside, not much traffic on the highway. I was wiping down tables around 1:30 a.m. when the bell above the door chimed. A man walked in, middle-aged, wearing a brown jacket and a baseball cap, sat at the counter and ordered coffee and a slice of lemon pie. I served him and went back to cleaning, normal stuff. But then something weird happened. The man finished his pie, left a $5 tip, and walked out. The bell chimed again. I looked at the clock. It was 1:47 a.m. Then, at exactly 1:30 a.m., the bell chimed again. The same man walked in, same brown jacket, same baseball cap. He sat at the exact same spot at the counter and ordered coffee and lemon pie. Word for word, the same order. I thought maybe I was tired. Night shifts can mess with your head. But I watched him eat the pie, leave the same $5 tip, and walk out at exactly 1:47 a.m. I checked the register. There were 2 sales for lemon pie, 17 minutes apart. It happened again the next night. Same man, same time, same order. This time I was ready. I wrote down everything he did. How he stirred his coffee clockwise 3 times. How he cut the pie into 4 pieces before eating it. How he checked his phone twice while eating. Everything matched exactly. Asterisk. By the 4th night, I was scared. Not of the man, but of what was happening to time. I tried talking to him, asking where he was from. He looked at me like I was crazy and said, "Miss, I just want my pie." Same voice, same words, every time. I started timing it with the clock on the wall. From the moment he walked in to the moment he left was always exactly 17 minutes. I could predict everything he would do: when he would reach for the sugar, when he would look at his phone, when he would ask for the check. On the 7th night, I decided to change something. When he ordered the lemon pie, I told him we were out. He looked confused for a second. Then he got up and left without saying anything. I thought maybe I had broken whatever was happening. But at 1:30 a.m. the next night, the bell chimed again. The same man walked in, sat down, and ordered coffee and lemon pie. When I told him we didn't have any, he looked at me and said, "But you served it to me yesterday." His voice sounded different, scared. I brought him the pie. He ate it, like always, but this time he kept staring at me. Before he left, he said, "How many times have I been here?" I told him 7 times. He went pale and said, "I only remember once." That was the last time I saw him, but I've thought about him every day since then. Looked into the diner's history and found out that in 1987, a man died in a car accident right outside. His car hit a tree at 1:47 a.m. He had just left Miller's Diner after ordering coffee and lemon. Time. I don't work there anymore. I couldn't handle the late nights, the empty feeling that place had. But sometimes I drive past Miller's around 1:30 a.m. and I swear I can see someone sitting at the counter. Always the same man, always eating pie, always trapped in those 17 minutes between life and death. Maybe some people get stuck when they die. Maybe they keep living the same moment over and over, not knowing they're already gone. And maybe sometimes, if you're in the right place at the right time, you can see them trying to finish what they started. The classroom that never changed him, a substitute teacher. So I've worked at a lot of different schools. Most of them blend together after a while. Same hallways, same cafeteria smell, same tired teachers counting down to retirement. But there was one school, Lincoln Middle School, in a small town in Ohio, that I'll never forget. It was my 3rd day subbing there. I was covering for a 7th grade English teacher named Mrs. Rodriguez, who had called in sick. The class was supposed to be reading The Outsiders and working on a book report. Simple enough. The classroom was on the second floor, room 237. It had those old-fashioned wooden desks arranged in rows, a green chalkboard that looked like it hadn't been replaced since the 1980s, and windows that faced the parking lot. There were posters on the walls about grammar and famous authors, all a little faded and curled at the edges. The kids filed in after lunch, talking and laughing like middle schoolers do. I took attendance, explained what we were doing, and let them get to work. Everything was normal until about 10 minutes into the class. That's when I noticed the clock on the wall. It said 1:23 p.m. I looked at my phone to check the time, and it also said 1:23 p.m., but something felt wrong. The second hand on the wall clock wasn't moving. I watched it for a full minute. The second hand stayed perfectly still, pointing at the 6, but my phone showed the time changing normally, 1:24, then 1:25. I thought maybe the classroom clock was broken. Schools always have broken clocks. But then I looked at the kids. They were all working quietly, writing in their notebooks, but something was off. They were writing the same things over and over, the same words, the same movements. A girl named Jessica in the front row was writing The Outsiders is About, and then erasing it, writing it again, erasing it again. Same motion, over and over. A boy named Marcus was tapping his pencil on his desk in the exact same rhythm. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, pause, never changing. I walked around the room, looking at their papers. They were all writing the same sentences repeatedly. Pony Boy is the main character. Pony Boy is the main character. Pony Boy is the main character. But when I spoke to them, they responded normally. When I asked Jessica how the book report was going, she said, "Good, Mrs. ... and then paused, like she'd forgotten my name. Even though I had written it on the board, I looked at the chalkboard. My name was there, Ms. Thompson, but it was fading. It's like someone was slowly erasing it. The weirdest part was the light coming through the windows. It never changed. The shadows on the floor stayed in exactly the same position, even though my phone showed that time was passing. I tried to leave the classroom, thinking I needed some air. But when I opened the door, I was looking at the same classroom, same kids, same desks, same faded posters. I was inside room 237, opening the door to room 237. I closed the door and tried again. Same thing. The kids didn't seem to notice anything strange. They just kept writing the same sentences, making the same movements, living in the same moment over and over. I spent what felt like hours in that room. My phone said it was still 1:23 p.m. The wall clock never moved. The kids never finished their sentences. The light never changed. Then, suddenly, the bell rang. All the kids looked up at the same time, packed their bags, and filed out of the room in perfect order. The clock started moving again. My phone showed 2:15 p.m., which is when the class was supposed to end. I grabbed my things and left as fast as I could. The next day, I called the school office and asked about room 237. The secretary said there was no room. 237. The second floor only went up to room 235. I went back to check. The room was there, but the door was locked and covered in dust. Through the small window, I could see old furniture covered in sheets. It looked like no one had used it in years. I asked another teacher about it. She said room 237 used to be Mrs. Henderson's English classroom, but it was closed after she died in the room during class. Heart attack, right at her desk. The kids had to sit there with her body until help arrived. That was in 1987. I looked up Mrs. Henderson in old yearbooks. She died on October 15, 1987 at 1:23 p.m. on teaching The Outsiders to her 7th grade class. I think what I experienced was her last class. playing over and over like a broken record. Maybe when someone dies, suddenly, like that part of them gets stuck in that moment. Maybe the room holds on to it, waiting for someone to notice. I never went back to Lincoln Middle School. But sometimes I wonder if Mrs. Henderson is still there, teaching the same lesson to the same kids who never age, never learn, and never go home, trapped in 1:23 p.m. forever, trying to finish a class that death wouldn't let her complete. The phone call that already happened, this is probably going to sound crazy, but I need to tell someone about what happened to me 6 months ago. Still, don't understand it, and I probably never will. But it changed how I think about everything. I was living in a small apartment in Portland, Oregon, working at a call center for a phone company. Not glamorous work, but it paid the bills. Most days were the same. Take calls, help people with their phone problems, go home, repeat. My mom lived about 2 hours away in a town called Salem. We talked every Sunday at 7 p.m. It was our tradition. She would call, we would chat for about an hour, and then say goodbye until the next week. We had been doing this for 3 years. Ever since I moved out, on this particular Sunday in March, I was waiting for a call. It was 6:58 p.m., and I was making dinner, keeping one eye on my phone. At exactly 7 p.m., it rang. "Hi, sweetie," my mom said. Her voice sounded a little tired, but normal. "Hey, Mom, how was your week?" We talked about normal stuff, her job at the library, my work at the call center, the weather. She mentioned that she had been having headaches and might go see a doctor. I told her that was probably a good idea. About 40 minutes into the call, she said something that made me stop what I was doing. "You know, I had the strangest dream. Last night, I dreamed that I called you, and we had this exact conversation, word for word, even down to you telling me I should see a doctor about my headaches." I laughed. "That is weird, but we talk about the same stuff every week. Maybe your brain just predicted what we would say." "Maybe," she said, but she sounded unsure. It just felt so real, like it had already happened. We finished the call like we always did. She said she loved me. I said I loved her too, and we hung up at 7:52 p.m. The next Sunday, I was waiting for her call again. Same routine, same time. The phone rang at exactly 7 p.m. "Hi, sweetie," my mom said. Her voice sounded exactly the same. A little tired, but normal. "Hey, Mom, how was your week?" We talked. I started to feel strange. She was saying the same thing she had said the week before, word for word. She told me about her job, asked about mine, mentioned the weather. Then she said she had been having headaches and might see a doctor. I thought maybe I was just remembering our conversation. Wrong. People do talk about the same things every week. But then she said the exact same thing about her dream. "You know, I had the strangest dream last night. I dreamed that I called you, and we had this exact conversation, word for word, even down to you telling me I should see a doctor about my headaches. This time, I didn't laugh." "Mom, you said that?" "The exact same thing last week." There was a long pause. "What do you mean? You told me about that dream last week." "We had this same conversation." "No, we didn't. We talked about your job and my headaches, but I didn't mention any dream." I was confused, but I didn't want to argue with her. Maybe I was misremembering. We finished the call at 7:52 p.m., just like always. But the next Sunday, it happened again. Same conversation, same timing, same words. She even paused at the same moments and laughed at the same things. By the 4th week, I was scared. I started writing down what she said during our calls. Every word, every pause, every laugh. And it was identical every time. Not similar, identical. I tried changing the conversation, and she asked about my job. I made up a story about getting promoted. She listened and congratulated me, but then she went right back to the script, talking about her headaches, mentioning the dream. On the 5th week, I confronted her about it directly. Mom, we've had this exact conversation 4 times now. Asterisk, what are you talking about, honey? Talk every Sunday, but never about the same things. You're going to tell me about a dream where we had this exact conversation. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, you know, I had the strangest dream last night. I hung up the phone. I was shaking. I called her back immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried again an hour later. Same thing. I drove to Salem that night. Her apartment was dark, but her car was in the parking lot. The landlord let me in after I explained that I was worried about her. She was in her bedroom, lying on her bed like she was asleep, but she wasn't breathing. The paramedics said she had been dead for hours. Probably died around 7 p.m. They found a brain tumor during the autopsy. The doctor said it had been growing for months. It's causing headaches and probably affecting her memory and behavior. Here's what I can't stop thinking about. If my mom died that night, who had I been talking to for 5 weeks? Why did she keep having the same dream about a conversation that had already happened? I've thought about it over and over, and I have a theory. Maybe when my mom was dying, some part of her got stuck in that last phone call. Maybe her brain, confused by the tumor and the approach of death, kept replaying our final conversation. Maybe she was trying to tell me goodbye, but the only way she could do it was by repeating the last normal conversation we ever had. I haven't gotten any phone calls on Sunday at 7 p.m. since then, but sometimes when I'm alone at night, my phone will ring and no one will be there. And I wonder if somewhere in some version of reality, my mom is still trying to call me every Sunday to tell me about her dream. The dream where we had a conversation that already happened. In a world where she never got to say goodbye. The night shift that never ended before I got my current job. I worked security at an office building downtown. It was one of those big glass towers, 40 stories tall, filled with accounting firms and insurance companies. During the day, it was busy and loud, but at night, it was empty and quiet. That was my shift. I worked from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 5 nights a week. My job was simple. Walk around the building every hour, check all the doors, make sure no one was inside who shouldn't be. Most nights, nothing happened. I would do my rounds, sit at the security desk, watch some TV, and wait for morning. The building had a strange layout. The floors were numbered, normally 1 through 40, but there were some weird quirks. The 13th floor didn't exist, which is common in old buildings. But there was also no 37th floor. When you rode the elevator, it went from 36 to 38. The buttons were labeled that way, and the floor numbers in the stairwell skipped right over 37. I asked my supervisor about it when I first started. He said the 37th floor was used for building maintenance and wasn't accessible to regular tenants. It made sense to me. Everything was normal for the first few months. I did my job, kept to my routine, and never had any problems. But then, one night in January, something changed. I was doing my 2 a.m. rounds, taking the elevator up to the top floors and working my way down. When I got to the 38th floor, I noticed something different. There was a button for the 37th floor in the elevator. I stared at it for a full minute. I had been using this elevator every night for months, and there had never been a 37th floor button. But there it was, right between 36 and 38, like it had always been there. I pressed it. The elevator stopped. The doors opened to a floor that looked exactly like all the others. Beige carpet, fluorescent lights, office doors with company names on them. Nothing unusual, except for the fact that this floor wasn't supposed to exist. I walked around, checking doors like I always did. Most were locked, but I could see into the offices through the glass windows. They looked normal. At desks, computers, filing cabinets. Some had personal photos and coffee mugs, like people actually worked there at the end of the hallway. There was a corner office with a sign that read Mitchell and Associates. Through the window, I could see someone sitting at the desk. A man, in a suit, maybe 50 years old, working on some paperwork. He looked up when he saw me and waved, like he was used to seeing security guards during the night shift. I waved back and kept walking. It was weird, but not scary. Just a guy working late. The next night, I went back to the 37th floor. The same man was there, in the same office, doing the same paperwork. He waved when he saw me. This happened every night for a week. Same man, same wave, same paperwork. I started to think maybe it was one of those people who worked really late hours. Some lawyers and accountants do that, but on the 8th night, I decided to try talking to him. I knocked on his office door. "Come in," he said. I opened the door and walked inside. The office was nice. Big wooden desk, bookshelves full of legal books, a view of the city through the windows. "I'm sorry to bother you," I said. "I'm the security guard. I just wanted to introduce myself." "Huh?" He looked at me with a confused expression. "Security guard? I didn't know we had security. I work the night shift. I've seen you here every night this week." He put down his pen and looked at me more carefully. "What week?" "This week. Monday through Friday." "Son," he said slowly, "it's Monday night." I looked at my watch. He was right. It was Monday, but I distinctly remembered seeing him on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. "Have you been working here all week?" I asked. "I've been working here tonight," he said. "Just tonight. I have a big case tomorrow, so I'm staying late to prepare." I thanked him and left, feeling confused. Maybe I was getting my days mixed up because of the weird schedule. But the next night, Tuesday, he was there again. Same position, same paperwork, same wave. When I knocked on his door, we had the exact same conversation. He said it was Monday night. He was preparing for a big case tomorrow. This continued for months. Every single night, no matter what day it actually was, he thought it was Monday. He was always preparing for the same big case that was always tomorrow. I started asking him questions. His name was Robert Mitchell. He had been a lawyer for 25 years. He founded Mitchell and Associates in 1992. He had a wife named Susan and 2 kids in college. But when I looked up Mitchell and Associates online, I found out that Robert Mitchell had died in 1998. He had a heart attack while working late in his office, preparing for an important case. They found him the next morning, slumped over his desk. The 37th floor had been sealed off after that. The company wanted to avoid reminders of the tragedy. I kept visiting Robert every night. He was always friendly, always willing to chat, always convinced it was Monday night and he had a big case tomorrow. He never remembered our previous conversations, but he never seemed bothered by that. Sometimes I would sit with him for an hour, just talking about his family, his work, his plans for the future. He would show me pictures of his kids, tell me about vacations he was planning to take with his wife. But his kids were grown now, probably in their 30s. His wife had remarried years ago. The future he was planning for had already passed him by. I think Robert got stuck in his last night alive. Maybe when you die while doing something important, part of you keeps trying to finish it. Maybe he's still there on the 37th floor that doesn't exist, working on a case that will never go to trial, waiting for a tomorrow that will never come. I don't work at that building anymore. I got a different job, better pay, regular hours, but sometimes I drive past that glass tower at night, okay, and I look up at the 37th floor, the gas station on Elm Street. My name is David, okay, and this happened to me 2 years ago when I was working the graveyard shift at a mobile station in a small town in Kentucky. The station was nothing special, just 2 pumps, a small convenience store, okay, and me sitting behind bulletproof glass from midnight to 8 in the morning. The job was usually boring, okay, maybe 10 customers, on a busy night, mostly truckers getting coffee or locals buying cigarettes and energy drinks. I spent most of my time reading books or watching old movies on my phone. The owner, Mr. Patterson, was okay with that as long as I kept the place clean and didn't let anyone steal anything. The station was on Elm Street, right at the edge of town where it meets the highway. During the day, there was decent traffic, but at night, it was dead quiet. Sometimes I wouldn't see a single car for 2 hours straight. It's just me, the fluorescent lights, and the sound of the coolers humming. It started on a Wednesday night in September. I was restocking the candy shelves around 2:30 a.m. when I heard the bell above the door ring. A woman walked in, maybe 40 years old, wearing a blue winter coat and carrying a small purse. She had short brown hair and looked tired, like she'd been driving for hours. She walked straight to the coffee machine, poured herself a large cup, and grabbed a bag of chips from the rack. Then she came to the counter and paid with exact change. $3.75. Long night. I asked, trying to be friendly. She looked at me with these sad eyes and said, "The longest." Then she walked out without another word. I watched her get into an old red Toyota and drive toward the highway. The whole interaction took maybe 3 minutes, but something about it stuck with me. Maybe it was the way she said the longest, like she meant something deeper than just being tired the next night. Thursday, the exact same thing happened. Same woman, same blue coat, same time. She got coffee and chips, paid with exact change. Said the longest when I asked about her night. Okay? Thought maybe she was a trucker or worked some weird shift that brought her through town at the same time every night. But when she left, I watched her license plate. It was the same red Toyota Dot. By Friday night, I was paying closer attention. She walked in at exactly 2:33 a.m., went straight to the coffee machine. Same movements, same choices. Large coffee, same brand of chips. When she came to the counter, I had the exact change ready. $3.75, I said before she could speak. She looked surprised for a second, then handed me the money. When I asked about her night, she gave me the same sad look and said, "The longest." This time, I followed her outside and watched her drive away. But here's the weird part. I saw her car turn left onto the highway, heading east. But there's nothing that way except farmland and a dead-end road that leads to an old quarry. It's been closed for years. On Saturday night, I decided to ask her about it. When she came in at 2:33 a.m., I said, "You come in here every night around this time. The lights are always on." She stopped walking and stared at me every night. 4 nights in a row. Same coffee, same chips, same exact change. She looked confused, almost scared. I don't. Only remember tonight. I showed her the receipt from the night before, which I had kept in the register. Thursday night, 2:33 a.m. Same purchase. She looked at the receipt like she'd never seen it before. This isn't possible. I've never been here before tonight. And then she went ahead and bought the same coffee and chips, paid with exact change, and sat the longest when I asked about her night, like she couldn't help herself. After she left, I called my buddy Jake, who worked at the 24-hour diner across town. I asked if he'd seen a woman in a blue coat driving around at night. "You mean Linda Morrison," he said. "She used to come in here sometimes, but not for a while now." "Used to?" "Yeah, she died about 6 months ago. Car accident, out by the old quarry. Happened late at night, around 2:30 or 3 a.m. Real sad story. She was going through a divorce, having a hard time sleeping. I felt cold all over." "What did she look like?" "Short brown hair, always wore this blue winter coat. Nice lady, but seemed really depressed. The night she died, she came into the diner and ordered coffee to go. I asked her how she was doing, and she said it was the longest night of her life. I looked up the accident in old newspapers online. Linda Morrison, age 42, died when her red Toyota went off the road near Miller's Quarry. The accident happened at 2:47 a.m. on March 15th. The police said she fell asleep at the wheel, but I think there was more to it than that. I think she was driving around that night, maybe thinking about ending her pain, and she stopped at my gas station for coffee and chips. Maybe it was the last normal thing she did before she drove out to that quarry. The next night, Sunday, she came in again. Same time, same routine. But this time, when she was leaving, I stopped her. "Linda," I said, "your name is Linda Morrison." She turned around slowly. "How do you know my name? You've been coming here every night for a week. I looked you up." She stared at me for a long moment. "I don't understand what's happening to me. Keep driving around at night, but I can never seem to get home. Every time I try to go home, I end up here." I wanted to tell her the truth, that she was dead, that she'd been dead for months. "But how do you tell someone that it's dead?" I said. "Maybe you should try going somewhere else. Maybe home isn't where you think it is." She nodded slowly and left. But instead of turning toward the highway, she drove back into town. That was the last time I saw her. I asked Jake at the diner if she'd been by there. He said no, but he thought he'd seen her car parked at the cemetery one night, near the newer section where they'd buried her. I think Linda was stuck in her last night alive, driving the same route over and over, buying coffee and chips like she did on the night she died. Maybe she was looking for peace, or maybe she was just trying to remember what it felt like to be alive. I don't work at that gas station anymore. Got a day job at a factory, better pay and no night shifts. But sometimes I drive past that mobile station late at night, and I look for a red Toyota in the parking lot. I've never seen it again. But I hope that means Linda finally found her way home. The library after Horsine, a librarian at the public library in a small city in Michigan. I've always loved books and quiet places, so it seemed like the perfect job for me. The library is in an old building from the 1920s, with high ceilings, wooden shelves, and that smell that all old libraries have. During the day, it's busy with students and families, but in the evening, it's peaceful. My shift usually ends at 8 p.m. when we close to the public, but I often stay later to shelf books and do paperwork. I have keys to the building, so I can lock up when I'm finished. Most nights, I'm done by 9:30 and heading home. It was a Tuesday in October when I first noticed something strange. I was working in the children's section, putting picture books back on the shelves, when I heard footsteps in the main reading room. Slow, deliberate footsteps, like someone walking between the tall stacks of books. I thought maybe someone had hidden in the bathroom when we closed and was now wandering around. It happens sometimes. I called out, "Hello? The library is closed. You need to leave now." The footsteps stopped. I waited a few minutes, then went to check the main reading room. It was empty. All the lights were off except for the security lights we keep on all night. No one was there. I shrugged it off and went back to work. But 20 minutes later, I heard the footsteps again. This time, they seemed to be coming from the second floor, where we keep the history and biography sections. I went upstairs to investigate. The second floor was dark and empty, but I could smell something weird. Old paper and dust, but also something else. Something that reminded me of the nursing home where my grandmother had lived before she died. I turned on the lights and looked around. Everything seemed normal. But then I noticed that one of the reading tables had a book on it. That was odd because I always clear all the tables before leaving, okay? And I was sure this table had been empty. The book was a biography of Franklin Roosevelt, thick and old with a worn cover. It was open to a page about World War II, and there was a bookmark made from a piece of paper with handwriting on it. I picked up the bookmark and read it. In shaky handwriting, it said, "For Margaret, keep learning. Love, Grandpa, Joe." I didn't recognize the handwriting, and I had no idea who Margaret or Grandpa Joe were. I closed the book and put it back on the shelf where it belonged, then cleared the table and turned off the lights. But the next night, Wednesday, the same thing happened. Footsteps upstairs, the same book on the same table, open to the same page. The bookmark was there too, with the same message. This continued for a week. Every night, after the library closed, I would hear footsteps upstairs. When I investigated, I would find the Roosevelt biography on the reading table, always open to the same page about World War II. I started asking other librarians about it. Mrs. Chen, who had worked there for 20 years, told me something interesting. We used to have a regular patron named Joe Brennan, she said. Old man, probably in his 80s. He came in every day for years, always sat at that same table upstairs, always reading history books. He had a granddaughter named Margaret who would visit him sometimes. Asterisk, what happened to him? He died about a year ago, had a heart attack right there at his usual table. Poor Margaret found him when she came to pick him up. He was reading that Roosevelt biography when it happened. That evening, I decided to stay late and see what would happen. I finished my regular work, then sat downstairs in the main reading room and waited at exactly 8:45 p.m. I heard the front door open and close, even though I knew it was locked. Then I heard slow footsteps walking toward the staircase. I crept to the bottom of the stairs and listened. The footsteps went up to the second floor, walked to the history section, and stopped. I could hear the sound of a chair being pulled out and someone sitting down. I waited 10 minutes, then quietly walked upstairs. The Roosevelt biography was on the table, open to the same page about World War II, but this time could see an indentation in the chair cushion, like someone was sitting there. I sat down at a nearby table and waited. For an hour, I sat there in the dark, watching that empty chair and open book. Sometimes I thought I could hear the sound of pages turning. Very quietly, at exactly 9:45 p.m., the chair creaked like someone was getting up. The book closed by itself. Heard footsteps walking back toward the stairs. Then the sound of the front door opening and closing again. I went to the table and found the bookmark with the message from Margaret. This happened every night for 2 weeks. Always the same time, same book, same routine. Joe Brennan was still coming to the library, still reading his history books, still leaving bookmarks for his granddaughter. I decided to do some research. I looked up Joe Brennan in old newspapers and found his obituary. It said he had been a regular at the library for 15 years, ever since his wife died. Reading was his favorite activity, and he especially loved learning about World War II, cause his father had served in the war. The obituary also mentioned that he had been very close to his granddaughter, Margaret, and that he had always encouraged her to keep learning and reading. I found Margaret's contact information in the phone book and called her. I explained who I was and asked if she would like her grandfather's bookmark. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "He's still leaving me bookmarks. You know about this? I've been having dreams about him every night for weeks. In the dreams, he's sitting at his table in the library, reading and waiting for me. He always tells me to keep learning." Kay, she came to the library the next evening. Kay gave her the bookmark, and she sat at her grandfather's table for a while, reading the Roosevelt biography. "He used to read me stories from this book," she said, "about the war and the brave people who fought in it. He said history was important because it teaches us how to be better." After that night, the footsteps stopped. Never found any more books on the table, and I never heard the front door opening and closing after hours. I think Joe Brennan had been waiting for his granddaughter to come back to the library one more time. Maybe he wanted to make sure she remembered his lessons about learning and reading. Maybe he just wanted to say goodbye properly. Margaret still comes to the library sometimes. She always sits at her grandfather's table and reads history books. And sometimes, when she's reading, I swear I can see two shadows at that table instead of one. The bus route to nowhere. I drive a city bus in Cleveland, Ohio, Route 47, which runs from downtown out to the suburbs on the east side. It's not the most exciting job, but it's steady work, and I like meeting different people every day. Most of my passengers are regulars, people going to work, students heading to school, elderly folks running errands. I work the evening shift, 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., so I see the after-school crowd, people getting off work, and the night shift workers heading to their jobs by 10 p.m. The bus is usually pretty empty, except for a few stragglers. This all started about 8 months ago on a Thursday night. I was making my last run of the evening, heading back downtown to the depot. It was around 10:30 p.m., and I only had 3 passengers on board: a nurse heading to the hospital for a night shift, a college student with a backpack full of books, and an elderly man in a gray coat sitting near the back. The elderly man caught my attention because he looked familiar, but I couldn't place where I'd seen him before. He was probably in his 70s, with white hair and glasses, carrying a small paper bag like he'd been to the pharmacy. When we reached the hospital stop, the nurse got off. At the next stop, the college student got off. That left just me and the old man. But here's where it gets weird. The old man didn't get off at any of the remaining stops. I watched him in my mirror, and he just sat there, staring out the window with a sad expression on his face. When we reached the end of the line downtown, I turned around and said, "End of the line, sir. Everyone needs to get off here." He looked at me with confusion, but I haven't reached my stop yet. "What stop are you looking for?" "Maple Street." "I live on Maple Street." I checked my route map. There was no Maple Street on Route 47. "I'm sorry, sir, but we don't go to Maple Street. You might need a different bus." He looked more confused. "But I take this bus every day. It always goes to Maple Street." I felt bad for the old guy. Maybe he had dementia or something. I helped him off the bus and pointed him toward the information booth where someone could help him figure out the right route to get home. The next night, Friday, the same thing happened. The old man got on at the same stop, sat in the same seat, and rode all the way to downtown without getting off. When I told him it was the end of the line, he gave me the same confused look and asked about Maple Street. This time I asked him his name. "Henry Walsh," he said. "I live at 412 Maple Street with my daughter Susan. I take this bus home from work every day." I wrote down his information and gave it to the dispatch office, thinking maybe they could help track down his family. But when they looked him up, they said there was no Henry Walsh at that address. There was no Maple Street anywhere in the city. This continued for weeks. Every night, Henry would get on my bus at the same stop, sit in the same seat, and ride to the end of the line looking for a street that didn't exist. I always seemed surprised when I told him we were downtown. I started talking to him during K-Wars, the rides. He told me he worked at a factory that made auto parts, had worked there for 35 years. He lived with his daughter Susan since his wife died 10 years ago. Seemed perfectly lucid, except for the confusion about where he was going. One night, I asked him what year he thought it was. 1987, he said without hesitation. "Mr. Walsh, it's 2023. He looked at me like I was crazy. "That's impossible. I just got off work an hour ago. It's Thursday, November 12th, 1987. I did some research when I got home. I looked up Henry Walsh in old phone books and newspaper archives. I found him listed at 412 Maple Street in the 1987 phone book. But I also found his obituary in the newspaper from December 1987. Henry Walsh, age 73, died of a heart attack while riding the city bus home from work. He had worked at Thompson Auto Parts for 35 years and was survived by his daughter, Susan Walsh Martinez. The article said he collapsed on Route 47. on November 19th, 1987, and died before the ambulance arrived. I looked up the old route, 47 schedule from 1987. Back then, the route was different. It did go down Maple Street. I think Henry died on that bus while trying to get home to his daughter, and part of him is still trying to complete that journey. Every night, he gets on the bus at the same stop where he used to catch it after work, and he rides the route looking for a street that was removed from the city decades ago. I started bringing him a cup of coffee during our rides. He always seemed grateful and would tell me stories about his work at the factory and his daughter, Susan. He was a nice old man who just wanted to get home. Asterisk, one night I asked him, what would you do if you could see Susan again? I'd tell her I'm proud of her. He said, she's a good girl. Going to nursing school, wants to help people. I looked up Susan Walsh Martinez online. She was in her 60s now, retired from a career as a nurse. She lived about an hour outside the city. I called her and explained who I was. At first, she thought I was playing some kind of cruel joke. But when I described her father exactly and told her things only he would know, she started crying. He's been visiting me in dreams, she said. Almost every night for months. He's always on a bus, trying to get home. He keeps saying he's proud of me, and she came downtown the next evening and rode my bus. When Henry got on at his usual stop, he didn't seem to recognize her at first. She was older than he remembered, of course, but when she said, "Hi, Dad, I've been waiting for you," his face lit up with joy. They rode together to the end of the line, talking and holding hands. Susan told him about her life, her career as a nurse, her children, his grandchildren he never got to meet. When we reached downtown, they both got off the bus together. Henry looked around, then looked at Susan. "I remember now," he said. "I was trying to get home to you." "You did, Dad. You made it home." I watched them walk away together into the crowd. That was the last time I ever saw Henry Walsh on my bus. Susan sent me a thank you card a few weeks later. She said her dreams about her father had stopped, and she felt like they had finally gotten to say goodbye properly. Sometimes I still look for Henry when I'm making that evening run, but he's never there. I think he finally found his stop on Maple Street, even though that street doesn't exist in this world anymore. Maybe love is stronger than death. And maybe some journeys are so important that we keep trying to complete them even after our bodies give up. Maybe Henry spent 36 years riding that bus, waiting for the chance to tell his daughter one more time that he was proud of her. The overnight janitor who wouldn't leave by work as a night security supervisor at a large office complex in downtown Portland. It's a newer building, about 15 years old, with offices for law firms, accounting companies, and other businesses. During the day, the building is busy with hundreds of workers, but at night, it's just me and a small crew of janitors, keeping the place clean and secure. I've been working there for 3 years, and I know all the cleaning staff pretty well. There's Maria, who's been there longest, and always brings homemade cookies to share. There's James, a college student who works nights to pay for school. Kay, an older guy who's quiet but does good work. Frank was probably in his 60s, thin and gray-haired. Always wore the same blue work shirt with Franklin embroidered on the pocket. He worked floors 12 through 15, vacuuming carpets and emptying trash cans. He was the kind of employee you could count on. Always showed up on time, never complained, did his job, and went home. I usually did my security rounds every 2 hours, checking all the floors to make sure everything was secure. Frank worked from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., same as me, so I would see him several times each night. We'd nod to each other and maybe exchange a few words about the weather, or how busy the building had been that day. Everything was normal until about 4 months ago. I was doing my 3 a.m. rounds, walking through the 15th floor, when I saw Frank vacuuming the conference room at the end of the hall. Nothing unusual about that, except I could have sworn he had already cleaned that room earlier in the night. Working late tonight, Frank. High called out over the sound of the vacuum. He looked up and waved, then went back to his work. I continued my rounds and didn't think much about it. But the next night, the same thing happened. At 3 a.m., Frank was vacuuming the same conference room on the 15th floor. When I mentioned it to him, he looked confused. I haven't cleaned that room yet tonight, he said. I always do the conference rooms last around 5 a.m. Checked my watch. It was definitely 3:15 a.m. But Frank seemed certain about his schedule, so I figured maybe I was getting my times mixed up. The third night, I paid closer attention. At 1 a.m., during my first rounds, Frank was on the 12th floor emptying trash cans. At 3 a.m., he was vacuuming the 15th floor conference room. At 5 a.m., he was back on the 12th floor, emptying the same trash cans I had seen him empty 4 hours earlier. I started keeping a log of where I saw Frank during my rounds. The pattern was always the same: 12th floor at 1 a.m., 15th floor at 3 a.m., back to the 12th floor at 5 a.m. He was working the same areas multiple times each night. But when I asked the other janitors about it, they said Frank only worked his regular schedule. Maria said she saw him arrive at 11 p.m. and leave at 7 a.m., just like always. James said Frank worked floors 12 through 15 once per night, same as he'd been doing for years. I decided to talk to Frank directly. One night around 2 a.m., I found him on the 13th floor, mopping the bathroom. Frank, can I ask you something? How long have you been working here? About 8 years, he said. Started right after I retired from the post office. Do you ever feel like you're working the same areas twice in one night? He stopped mopping and looked at me with a worried expression. You know, lately, I have been feeling confused about my schedule. Sometimes I feel like I'm doing the same work over and over, but I can't remember if I already did it or if I still need to do it. Maybe you should talk to your doctor about that. Could be stress or fatigue. He nodded. Maybe you're right. Have been feeling tired lately. Really tired. The next week, Frank didn't show up for work. I asked Maria about it, and she said he had called in sick with the flu, but he didn't come back the following week either. I finally asked the building manager about Frank. He looked confused. Frank, you don't have anyone named Frank on the cleaning crew. It's Franklin. Older guy, gray hair, works floors 12 through 15. The manager checked his records. I don't see any Franklin on our payroll. Are you sure you have the right name? Described Frank in detail, but the manager insisted there was no employee matching that description. He said the night cleaning crew consisted of Maria, James, and 2 other people I'd never heard of. That night, I asked Maria about Frank. I've never worked with anyone named Frank, she said. It's been just me and James for the past 2 years, plus Rosa and Miguel, who started last month. But I had been seeing Frank every night for 3 years. I had his work schedule memorized. We had conversations about his retirement from the post office, his grandchildren, his plans for the weekend. I decided to review the security footage from the cameras in the building. I went back through weeks of recordings, looking for Frank on the floors where I had seen him working. He wasn't there. The cameras showed Maria, James, and the other janitors doing their work, but never Frank. On the recordings, I could see myself walking through the halls during my rounds, sometimes stopping to talk to someone who wasn't visible on camera. I looked like I was having conversations with empty air. I started to think I was losing my mind, but then I found something in the building's old employment records. Franklin Kowalski had worked as a night janitor from 2015 to 2018. According to the records, he died of a heart attack while working on December 15, 2018. He was found on the 12th floor next to his cleaning cart. That was over 5 years ago. But I had been seeing him and talking to him every night for 3 years. I looked up Franklin's obituary online. The photo showed the same man I knew as Frank. Gray hair, thin face, kind eyes. The obituary said he had worked for the post office for 30 years before retiring and taking the janitor job to stay active. He was survived by 2 daughters and 4 grandchildren. I visited his grave at Riverside Cemetery. There were fresh flowers on the headstone, probably from his family. I left a small note thanking him for being a good worker and a kind person. That night, I saw Frank one more time. He was on the 15th floor, putting away his cleaning supplies in the storage closet. "Frank," I said, "I know who you are now." He turned around and looked at me with sad, tired eyes. "It's been so confused lately," he said. "I keep trying to finish my work, but I can never seem to get done. I'm supposed to go home, but I can't remember where home is." "Frank, you don't work here anymore. You haven't worked here for 5 years." It was quiet for a long moment. "I died, didn't I?" "At work, on the 12th floor." I nodded. "Heart attack, December 15th, 2018. But I wasn't finished with my work that night. I still had the 15th floor to do." "Frank, you've been doing that work every night for 5 years. You've cleaned those floors thousands of times. Your work is done." He smiled sadly. "I just wanted to do a good job. I never liked leaving things unfinished. You were a great employee. Everyone would have understood if you hadn't finished that one night." Frank put his cleaning supplies back in the cart and walked toward the elevator. At the doors, he turned back to me. "Tell Maria and James they're good workers. I enjoyed working with them." "I will." The elevator doors closed, and that was the last time I saw Frank. I told Maria about him the next night. She listened to my whole story without interrupting. "I believe you," she said when I finished. "Sometimes this building feels like it has extra people in it, like there are more of us here than there should be. I always thought Frank was just shy and worked different hours. I still do my security rounds every night, walking through the same floors where Frank used to work. Sometimes I think I can smell the cleaning supplies he used, or hear the distant sound of a vacuum cleaner, but I never see him again. I think Frank spent 5 years trying to finish the work he was doing when he died. Maybe some people are so dedicated to their jobs that death can't stop them from clocking in. Maybe Frank needed someone to tell him that it was okay to rest, that he had done enough, that he could finally go home. The building feels different now, quieter somehow, but I still keep an eye on floors 12 through 15, just in case Frank ever needs help finding his way.